Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the listeners of the Good Anime Palette Podcast. Today, we are on episode 58. As usual, Will, Jason, bringing the hot, the heavy, the great anime and manga content that you look forward to every 2 weeks. Of course, have to apologize. We are a little bit late. We did encounter some technical issues, but
I done goofed, guys.
Yeah, don't worry about it. The GAP is back on schedule. So, Jason, how are you doing, my friend?
That cage match between us took a little too long. We had to take a shower, wipe the blood off our faces. All is fair in love and war, right? So,
yeah, didn't realize we were going to be switching into an MMA channel, but I guess that's the direction we're going to for today's episode, because we're going real knuckles down, knees up, straight into the face with some close quarter combat and hand-to-hand fighting in anime and manga.
But before we go into that, we have not really have anything to say about news, nor do we have anything to say about reading or watching. Doesn't mean there aren't news, doesn't mean there aren't anything that we are not reading or not watching. It's just,
but let's just get something out there first. The reason why we're not going into any news, usually we do. I mean, of course, if there's going to be an adaptation that we're interested in, or there's an update in terms of a cast list, or whatever's going to be happening in the upcoming seasons.
I mean, do you listeners, do you really want to know that the Delicious in Dungeon trailer is coming out on May 25th? There's a countdown on YouTube.
Yeah. Do you know that we're only several weeks away from the next season of anime? Therefore, voice casts are now being solidified and all that.
I forgot about. Oh my god! I really did forget. Holy shit!
Yeah, whatever. I mean, that kind of stuff. You probably don't care all that much, or if you do, then you probably would already know about that. But the other half of the news that's been circulating on Anime News Network, Kotaku, or My Anime List discussion boards, anywhere really where you can get your anime news, the subreddit as well, r/anime. It's all been very depressing. It's not good stuff. A lot of crime that's been happening in the Anosphere.
Oh, there is, I guess, something, not necessarily a news story, but it is something that I encountered. My Anime List is a website that we use constantly, and I'm sure a lot of you listeners do use My Anime List, Mal.
I'm sure they would have heard over the last 58 episodes, including this one that we've been doing.
It's great.
JP.
My Anime List is great.
Mostly, there's some controversies behind it, but
they got shut down for several days.
Okay, I didn't notice.
Oh, you didn't know?
I still got my Mal updates every day telling me how low Oshinoko-has been dropping in the rankings.
I think from the 9th to the 12th, it was hacked. Legit.
Yeah, it's probably all the fans who are not happy about Oshinoko dropping. That's probably what happened. It's okay. I mean, look, were you hankering for some Mal action? Were you really
I couldn't log in my Kengan Ashura.
Oh, okay. But I mean,
first world weeb problems.
You can log it on Netflix by watching it, I suppose.
Oh no, I watched it on Netflix, but I couldn't log it in on My Anime List as I was going through it.
So what you had to do? Get pen and paper and start writing down your read watch list?
No, Will, I'm not that archaic, but I had to rely on the good old noggin, which was kind of tough.
Just remember where you were.
I mean, the empty void inside my skull, inside my cranium, is kind of, limited in terms of memory space.
Okay. Well, I guess
but it's all good now.
I guess that's the major bit of news that we have. But I think instead of trying to waffle on what's been going on in the anime and manga world, or just talking about what we've been reading and watching, we're not doing that stuff either, because what we have been reading and watching is legitimately research and filler for what we're going to be discussing in today's anime topic, which is, as mentioned before, close quarter combat and hand-to-hand fighting in anime and manga. Now, as usual, we can just kind of give a quick sort of disclaimer or breakdown as to what this topic is about and why we're discussing it. Especially when you think, close quarter combat, hand-to-hand fighting, that's just fighting, right? Any anime has that.
Yeah, that's combat.
Yeah. You have that in Naruto, you have that in Demon Slayer, Jujutsu Kaisen, Chainsaw Man. Like, why?
All technically accurate.
And we've talked the shit about like all these series. Why are we? These are some of the most popular shonen actions in the world. Why are we discussing close quarter combat and hand-to-hand fighting specifically?
So, Will, why are we discussing close quarter combat and hand-to-hand combat specifically?
Yeah. So this is not necessarily trying to be like pedantic or gatekeeping in the way that like, oh, there is a real like specific difference between what happens in My Hero Academia fighting styles versus the ones that we'll be talking about later today.
But GAP is well known for definitions and disclaimers and being pedantic,
it's also,
right?
I think it's also just the fact that like there are certain anime series and manga series that really like take it to heart to try and sort of create really beautiful bits of art, bits of work in terms of showcasing really intricate and like really beautiful technique in hand-to-hand fighting, in close quarter combat, that's not necessarily deriving from like supernatural powers or just straight up like superhero shit. Like, look, we can talk about like the Genos and the One Punch Man fights in One Punch Man series, right? We can talk about
fights.
We can talk about Gaara and Rock Lee being like probably the most iconic fight in all of Naruto history. Or any of like the fights that take place in the Soul Society arc in Bleach, right? We know all that shit. We've seen it as kids, teenagers, and adults, and we all love that shit. But if I can just have like of an ounce of being a pedant, those aren't necessarily like sequences of beautifully drawn and coordinated fighting sequences, combat sequences, because there's a lot of flair.
Yeah, a lot of fantastical nature rather than more grounded in reality, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, to be a little bit more critical, it definitely is style over substance. And not to say that what we're going to be talking about today is just straight dry substance and technique, but some of them are done actually in a very beautiful and creative way. And we kind of wanted to highlight these series, some that we've never really talked much about over the last 2.5 years been doing this, which, by the way, holy shit, 2.5 years.
Yeah,
and
man.
the other half of it, which is we definitely have talked a lot about these series, but hey, we also like these series, so why not? Give me a chance to talk about some of my most favorite martial arts, close quarter combat, and hand-to-hand fighting anime and manga series of all time.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think we should probably stipulate is kind of our context behind it in terms of our personal investment and our background knowledge. So for me personally, I don't know that much about whether it is boxing, martial arts, MMA, all those types of competitions I am very unfamiliar with. However, I have worked with, at least when I was at Purdue, the wrestling team. I was their manager for one year.
You were working with collegiate wrestling?
Yeah.
Those guys are fucking hardcore.
Yeah, they were. I have like crazy stories.
You ever
dude.
sit in on any of their training sessions or their routines? Because
Yeah.
I've heard plenty of stories of like the work they put into it, and it's always like, oh, it's just a bunch of meatheads going wrestling and all that. But no, like there's a lot.
Cauliflower ears.
There's a lot that go into it. You know,
I had the very beautiful opportunity to basically buy a bunch of trash bags, let's just say, before weigh-in, and had to dispose
you had to
of...
work with their weight cuts as well, because weight cutting is a fucking
I was their manager.
big issue.
Yeah. And I became friends with quite a lot of them, so then I just kind of, I guess, did more than just be the more, I guess, behind the scenes, and just was there mostly because I like hanging out with them, and they're all like really down-to-earth cool dudes.
Yeah.
But I don't know that much about the sport itself compared to you, Will.
But the fact that you are also like in there behind the scenes helping out with weight cutting, I'm sure you also had a hand in sort of understanding their nutritional breakdowns, their rest periods, and how they should go about doing their workouts in terms of building back up the muscle mass to be able to compete for upcoming competitions and not dehydrate themselves when they're doing weight cuts.
It took me a long time to understand in like collegiate or high school wrestling when you restart and start from the center of the mat, and then you just put like a triangle on the person's back. I was like, can someone explain that to me? And it took me forever to really comprehend that. And I was just like, so you just put the hand there and then they just get off and that's it? Like, then what's the point? And
yeah. So you might not have experience or at least much exposure in terms of like looking at martial arts and combat sports from a spectator perspective, but at least
from a training perspective, at least I've seen a lot, and in some cases, like, you know, had hands-on experience, not as a coach or assistant coach, but just more of like an assistant to the assistant coach or the coach.
Yeah. I know we're going into some very intricate details. These are kind of things that you don't necessarily need to know about, especially when we're talking about the anime series we're going into, because these are things that are deeply rooted into like the behind the scenes of combat sports. It's not something that a lot of people really see, especially as a fan or a spectator. So we're not really going to go into those unless it calls for it in the specific series. What we're going to do first, however, is actually sort of break down a couple of words and definitions, especially as we go, you know, further down the road and talking about these specific anime series that will be featuring in today's topic discussion.
So how should I call you? MMA senpai, and I'm the MMA kohai? Is that the role reversal?
Whatever you want to call it.
All right.
I mean, yeah, I don't want to bring in my martial arts credentials into this, but yeah. Black belt in Taekwondo, 2 years of Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah. Anyways, so the first thing
karate is a martial art, right?
Dude, karate is a fucking hardcore.
And then Taekwondo. Just kidding.
Taekwondo is a performance art, but you can definitely use certain techniques to really blow someone's head off. Not that I've ever had to do that. But first things first. So the words I used earlier, CQC or close quarter combat, specifically in these instances, it usually involves 2 or more combatants involved in ranged or melee combat. By ranged, it can mean like using the projectile weapons, firearms. Most often, you use the term CQC or close quarter combat in more sort of like a warfare setting. You know, so it's like engagement between 2 different forces, typically one side being attackers or on the offensive, and the other being defenders or being on the defensive. Now, there's not necessarily like a specific distance that would be counted as close quarter combat.
Well,
but
for me personally, when I first encountered CQC, like the term, was when I played the really old PC game SWAT.
Okay, I thought you were going to say Metal Gear Solid. But okay, all right.
SWAT 3 was dope, but it was that I was like, what the hell is a CQC? They're using guns. How is it close quarters? But then I realized that close quarter combat didn't imply necessarily a range per se. Like,
yeah. I mean, like a close quarter like combat situation could literally be like you and me sitting like 5 feet away from each other, or it could be engagement between 2 forces down a hallway, down a corridor, or even like a small corner of a battlefield. The reason why like this is more fit within a militaristic / warfare setting as opposed to sort of just like street fighting is because the aim is not necessarily to just beat up your opponent. It's to diffuse a situation. It's to be able to de-escalate an engagement with an defensive. So that's why, like, for example, if we say a lot of what happens in like Counter-Strike, a lot of stuff does happen within close quarter combat, whether it's throwing knives or handgun combat. You're just literally trying to counteract the opposing forces that are coming towards you. So whether it's like an enclosed area that's controlled, or whether it is like trying to retrieve hostages from a situation, it's basically just trying to, as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, remove a threat from an enclosed area. So that's where we are going to be using CQC in this particular instance. Now, you can definitely train in specific, combat styles through CQC and employ it into, mixed martial arts, using it into combat sports. It's not always like directly transferable. But there's definitely been instances of like, ex-Marines or ex-soldiers that, through all their years of, close quarter combat training in the military, then transferred into a boxing ring or transferred into an MMA cage. So that does happen.
So for the layman, just to summarize, like close quarter combat, it does not only imply hand to hand. That is kind of the main gist. If we really distill it down to one sentence, which is not necessarily a fair thing to do, but it is one of those things that I take away from learning about CQC. So,
yeah. Now, CQC does not necessarily mean hand-to-hand combat. Now, straight up, the words kind of suggest that hand-to-hand would technically mean that, like, while it does fall under CQC, it usually doesn't involve the use of weapons, tools, guns, stuff like that. And a lot of it derives from the different varieties of martial arts and combat sports, like jiu-jitsu, karate, boxing, MMA, and CQC is more, as mentioned, militaristic combat. So let's take a step back into history. From a historical perspective, hand-to-hand combat kind of started from the days of pancration at the Greek Olympics back in 648 BC.
Yo.
So that was just straight up like it.
Thermae Romae.
It was Thermae Romae was probably not even for that far back. The Greeks preceded the Romans.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So yeah. So
I did very well in history class, guys.
Yeah. Did you do classics when you were in college as part of your
Nah.
No. Okay.
Nah.
I had to. Anyways.
I did gender studies.
I did too. I did gender studies as well.
I had to learn language too.
Yep. So now CQC is much more modern. It actually started and was codified by William Ewart Fairbairn and Eric Anthony Sykes during their time in the Shanghai Municipal Police of the International Settlement in Shanghai in the 1920s. So barely 100 years of history actually within the world of CQC. So it's as mentioned, CQC neutralizing an opposing threat. Hand to hand is more sort of like just it's gamesmanship. It's
right, like
competitive.
Sparring
it's competition
of sorts, right? So hand to hand implies obviously using your hands. So does, for example, using a weapon that is within your quote unquote range that you would typically use for boxing or sparring purposes, does that count as hand-to-hand combat?
You mean like using a weapon as in like a knife, a sword, or whatnot?
Yeah.
Because fencing would technically fall under hand-to-hand.
Right.
Yeah.
What about melee, the term melee?
Melee would essentially be the use of arms, blunt force weapons or tools. A sword will fall under that.
Right.
A gun wouldn't fall under that unless you're just literally pistol whipping each other. Then yes, that would be melee weapon.
Okay.
That would be melee range. That would be melee combat.
So one of the things that I think we want to emphasize is it's not just bare knuckles or gloves boxing, that type that encompasses not only CQC but also hand-to-hand combat, even though the name implies just hand to a hand.
Yeah. Hand-to-hand combat would be sort of more everyday combat, whether it's like a street fight or a boxing match,
late night street fights,
like a scuffle in the schoolyard or whatnot. Whereas CQC, you're literally like out in like the Arab deserts or like in the mountains of Europe and like trying to neutralize an enemy threat. So you wouldn't necessarily use CQC techniques to fight someone on the streets unless you were a complete badass and you're like a Krav Maga practitioner, just trying to instill fear into your opponents to let them know, don't fuck with me and I don't fuck with you. That's basically it.
So now that we have gotten we have all the definitions out the way, right?
Well, most of them. Again, it's like we're doing the best we can. I mean, again, I'm not claiming to be a martial arts expert, but I have done a lot of martial arts when in my youth, and also like I am a very avid fan of combat sports. So I'm gonna spit fire when I can.
I play a lot of fighting games. Does that count, Will?
So I think you maybe want to sort of go into a bit on the fighting game side, right? Because we've talked about fighting games, anime games, and all that. Like, actually, like, was it episode 7?
Episode 7 is Dead A's.
Okay, so but it was like in the first 10 episodes you started talking about fighting, right? Which one was that one?
I think it's episode 6.
Okay,
because episode 8 is horror.
Right. So what do you want to talk about fighting games about? Like, what in terms of like its influence in anime and manga? Because a lot of those games have derived from like anime and manga in terms of like the King of Fighters, Dead or Alive, Street
Grand
Fighter.
Blue Fantasy is also a popular one recently.
Guilty Gears, kind of still in the zeitgeist.
So one of the things that I would just want to mention offhand is that anime obviously is the main area of discussion with this podcast, but doesn't mean that anime doesn't have its variants in terms of, in this case, fighting games. Because when we talk about combat, usually when you watch a show or read a manga, there's going to not always be non-stop battles. Even if there's a tournament arc, there might be flashbacks whatsoever, things like that. But when you
just do a double negative, there's not always going to not be a fighting sequence.
Yes, Will, there's always going to be a fighting sequence. But what you fight, sometimes it's not physical, it's metaphorical.
It's within you.
It's within you.
The demon lies within, yeah.
But when you play Street Fighter, Tekken, Dead or Alive, Soul Calibur, all those types of fighting games, you actually see the animations that are on screen. You see the moves that are done. And if you play unless if you play the story mode, it is just the pure raw combat.
And to be fair, I mean, like we've mentioned before, a lot of these combat games, these fighting games, have derived from sort of like, you know, anime and manga inspirations.
Absolutely,
it's like
yeah.
You can't look at Street Fighter and be like, there's no influence from anime whatsoever.
There's Street Fighter anime.
Yeah.
There is a Tekken Bloodlines anime on Netflix that I don't think we should watch.
And there's loads of characters in anime and manga that you watch today that are inspired by existing, you know, Street Fighter or Dead or Alive or what are games? Yeah, just any game really. So it's not to say that like fighting games of yesteryear and anime now are forever intertwined, but you can't ignore the cross inspiration that both mediums offer for each other.
So once we go from video games back to anime, I think one of the things that really, in many ways, is used as a barometer of sorts to determine whether or not a fighting or action scene is dope as fuck is known as the Sakuga moments.
Yeah. So for the longest time when we were growing up, especially when watching like Hunter x Hunter, watching Yu Yu Hakusho, Dragon Ball, Demon Slayer nowadays with the kids. I mean,
with the kids, yeah, sure.
We the kids too, you know.
Yo,
but
you got my heart, bro.
But when you're watching, especially like for example, when you think about memorable fights in like My Hero Academia and Demon Slayer, it's not necessarily just, you know, swords clashing and, you know, people kicking each other and whatnot, but it's, you know, specific 5-minute sequences of a specific episode, right? Like for example, the All Might and Nomu fight. Or, for example, like Tanjiro and the spider demon, like those were amazing fights to watch, but from more of a spectacle element as opposed to a technical element. And this is where you sort of wanted to highlight Sakuga, because that's essentially what the purpose of Sakuga is. It is like a very noticeable upscale of quality in animation, color, vibrancy,
frames per second.
It's I mean, like, I wouldn't say that it is like a massive like jump from like 24, because usually like standard anime is like 24 frames per second,
24 to 30, yeah, somewhere there.
Yeah,
but if it's 60, have you seen 60 frames? It looks.
Dude, I showed you somebody upscaling sort of online from 24 to 60.
It looks so
it looks
smooth.
Gross.
It is gross.
It looks gross.
So gross.
But it does work in some instances if you know.
Haikyuu is pretty.
If
dope,
you know
though.
how to do it, right? So. Like those specific instances in My Hero Academia, in Haikyuu, well, Haikyuu's not a fighting anime, but we're talking about Sakuga, like great animation. Demon Slayer does it well because it's Ufotable and all that. Sakuga is probably like the main highlight of a lot of shonen actions because they're usually, not even usually, they're 99% of the time the most memorable scene in any anime series that you're watching.
Yeah, and Sakuga is kind of defined as like the moment when your blood gets, you know, like get a rise out of you, your adrenaline is pumping, and you're just like, fuck yeah, hype is literally being shown on the screen. Let's fucking go. Let's do this. That is the Sakuga moments, which is usually dictated not necessarily by, how would you say it, like, an uptick in frames per second, but like fluidity, just making everything very dynamic.
I mean, let's just talk specifically about Demon Slayer, right? That fight was it episode 17 or episode 18? I keep forgetting which one.
Oh, season 1?
Yeah.
The fire dance one?
Yeah.
I think it was like somewhere there was like 1819
with the demon spider, right? So you'll notice as well that a lot of times when you're watching Demon Slayer, it's usually a kind of more muted palette. It's a lot of grays, a lot of whites, a lot of red. But of course, when some real hot shit happens, especially when Tanjiro comes in to save the day, his green is a little bit more vibrant. The reds burn a little hotter, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, like I don't even have an HD screen I'm watching off of, or I'm watching on a lower resolution. Why do things look so much nicer? And this is where we sort of want to break down a little bit of the behind the scenes in terms of developing Sakuga moments. Now we've talked about budgeting and getting money from licensors and property developers to be able to get producers to work on specific series. Whenever we talk about money, it always seems like, oh, of course, the UFO table always gets the best projects, and that means they get the most money and all that. Therefore, they can make the best animations. In some ways, in the most simplistic way of answering it, yeah, that's true, but the way that the money is divided is not necessarily down to being like, oh, because we're all well paid, it means that we're all going to work more. No, it usually just means that because you get more money, you get to be able to outsource to more staff, you're able to bring on more people to join on board, but you still need a dedicated group of people who know what they're doing.
Or expertise, right? You need good storyboarding, even though you can have like unlimited money. If you don't know how to utilize it, it's just as good as zero in many ways, right?
In some cases as well, knowing when to blur like 2D animation with CGI, like that is a very fine line as well. Because CGI is also expensive to do.
Super hard to do.
And just because you have the money to use it, you and I have seen plenty of instances where CGI is just garbage.
So my first Sakuga moment in Demon Slayer was when Zenitsu first revealed his powers. That was
when he finally closed his eyes and shut the fuck up, right?
And does his awesome shit. And that is very, very like distilled in my mind as that like short, like 2-minute scene is Sakuga moment at its finest and purest, where the camera angle is completely different, things change, and all of a sudden it reverts back to, I guess, what you'd say like more static or more quote unquote normal, right?
Yeah, the non-Sakuga moments, the standard, right?
Yeah, and I think the blending of things is very important because if you just show like black and then white and then back to black, it's just like what?
Yeah, that's why the storyboarding and the cinematography, in terms of putting together those sequences, are extremely important. Budget's not always the case, right? Of course, if you're talking about using CGI, then yeah, budget can be sort of like a more like finicky thing to talk about. But like, say, for example, like comparing two 3D series, one which is Land of the Lustrous, which has some really amazing, beautiful combat sequences, versus X-Arm or Rusted Armors, which are relatively 3D, but also like what the fuck is going on?
Some beautifully dumb sequences, like terrible sequences, right?
That kissing scene, goddamn, a lot of garbage in X-Arm.
Nothing to do with Sakuga, it's just lighting, dude.
Yeah. So I think that, like, comes to no surprise that when we're talking about combat, fighting in anime and manga, that we have to talk about Sakuga. Now, a lot of the series that we'll be discussing in the more sort of like second half, tail end of today's discussion, a lot of them won't necessarily have that Sakuga moment, but that's also not going to be a bad thing either. In the end, just because you have a Sakuga moment does not necessarily mean that you have a great combat sequence or a fighting sequence. It does, however, mean that you have a great crescendo to an action sequence that culminates in hopefully the hero beating the villain, or a major resolution coming up and whatnot. It's more often used as like a plot device as opposed to actually adding more to the technical perspective of combat that's we want to more highlight in today's discussion.
Yeah, and I think one of those things is like when you think about, for example, live action, the movie The Matrix, you think about the awesome like martial art kung fu sequences, but you need a choreographer to be able to do, I mean, he's from Hong Kong too, to be able to pull all that off, right?
Yep.
And if that person is not there, or for example, going back to the context of anime, if the storyboarding is not good enough, or if you don't actually sometimes even act it out, with 3D CGI, dot mapping. Is that what would you call that?
You mean where they wear the suits and they have the little dots and whatnot? Yeah,
to show the skeleton. But if you don't even try to see is what is feasible, what's not, camera angles, all these, like, I guess you can say trickery of the mind or the camera or the composition can really make or break a series. And it's not necessarily mandatory, just like how there are plenty of very impactful action scenes, and all there is like one punch or like a sword clashing, but then there is a lot of heavy momentum and emotions that swell up. But that is, again, not the point of this episode's discussion.
Yeah.
It's more of like the technical parts, like more of the choreographer than, let's say.
Well, I mean, like let's use like a real life example, right? I think you mentioned Matrix earlier, right?
Yeah, I did.
So the choreographer for the Matrix,
Yuen Woo-ping.
Yeah, so he was actually the main guy, the one who coordinated the fighting scenes. He is technically the one for the Matrix Reloaded, as well as Matrix Revolutions, but he was not on board for the fourth one, the Matrix. I forgot what it's called.
I didn't even watch it.
I didn't watch it. I heard people say it was pretty damn good too. But the big noticeable drop off was the combat sequences, the fighting sequences were not nearly as good as what the first three were. And it was because Yuen Woo-ping was not there. Of course, there were a lot of complications in terms of COVID. Scheduling for filming was always going to be tough. Flights were pretty much non-existent at that point, so it was always going to be hard to be able to get him in. But you could see, like, especially like in Matrix 1, holy fuck, some of the fighting sequences were absolutely brilliant, bombastic for sure, but like fucking great. And that just shows the importance of having a choreographer when you're trying to create very slick, technically beautiful, but also very accurate and exciting fighting sequences in film.
And you can throw money to get someone that has that level of expertise, but it is not always guaranteed. And especially when going off of the X-Arm thing, when you go from 3D live action director to anime 3D, and you try to be like, oh, it's the same thing. It's like, no, bro, no,
it's not. You gotta really know how the joints move, how the camera angles swing from one end to another. You just have to have that kind of not only knowledge but experience in being able to handle what's on screen and how you want to portray your vision to the viewers and actually create something that makes sense as a combat scene. Now, we spent a lot of time talking about combat in general, but there's one thing that I think we kind of already glossed over a bit, but want to make sure that everybody sort of understands where we stand in this particular discussion. That just because there is a scene that has an action sequence does not necessarily mean that it is a close quarter combat or hand-to-hand fighting sequence. The one example that comes to mind would be in season 3 of of Attack on Titan, not final, but the third season with Levi.
Oh, the city?
Yeah. And the
Spider-Man?
And the little escape that he has using his air maneuver gear, right? As amazing as that sequence is, it's probably one of the greatest sequences in anime, at least within the last 10 years. Holy shit. Super cool, super slick. Definitely a lot of fighting going on, but I would argue that that's not necessarily a close quarter combat sequence. We talk about chase scenes. You talk about trying to essentially ascend from one point to another. Just because there's a lot of things happening does not necessarily mean that you would consider that to be a combat sequence or a hand-to-hand fighting sequence. I think the line is quite thin. I get that, but the spectacle itself is more down to the usage of the air maneuver gear and traversing throughout the city to be able to escape from a threat,
from an adversary, right? And I think another thing that we also want to I would want to take this time now to kind of clarify is, just because you don't have high, crazy choreography or unlimited budget, so to speak, does not mean that your action scene is bad by default. It could be very impactful. It could even be very good, but it may not be within the realm of what Will and I, in this case, would say is technical in terms of the fighting itself.
Like, I mean, for example, like if we talk about like the old school Dragon Ball, or even like the modern day like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, when they're just punching each other with like the flashes of right? Fucking amazing scenes to watch.
Hype as shit.
Those are not necessarily like technical fighting combat sequences, though, right? So like, we're not saying that one is bad and one is good. We're just saying that they're different, right? So you can't compare. Wow, I owe you a Coke.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
We can't like say like, oh, this is an apple, this is an orange, they're the same. No, like, they're completely not. They both have great benefits to one another, but they're not like similar in this particular aspect.
And that's the genesis of this episode, is to highlight the ones, the scenes or the anime series that really do put an emphasis on the more technical and the more technique that's technical. The technique oriented kind of scenes, right?
Yeah. And we also fully admire like amazingly animated, very beautiful, like explosive anime action sequences too. Like, I mean, like what would you, let's say, like, let's talk about like My Hero Academia. Would you say that outside of All Might and Nomu, that one of the most iconic fights would be Todoroki and Deku?
Oh, in the tournament arc? Yeah, 100%. I think Stain's fight is also...
That was sick, too.
And I think, actually, that is in an enclosed space. That is actually more, quote-unquote, hands...
That is close quarter combat.
Yep.
Because they need to take down a villain, but the villain also needs to incapacitate his pursuers as well.
Exactly.
That would technically be CQC. But when it comes to Deku and Todoroki, that's not necessarily close quarter combat. That's not really hand-to-hand fighting, because there's a lot of superpower shit going on.
Yeah, or like Gravity Girl against Bakugo, right? Bakugo.
Was the fire, the explosive guy?
Yeah.
Bakugo.
Yeah. In the same tournament arc that we're mentioning with Deku. Yeah, exactly. They are fantastical in nature, but you're not going to be able to pull any of that off in this current reality.
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff we talk about, most of it is more grounded in reality. Of course, the creators, the mangakas and the animators are going to take some liberties in terms of stretching the world of imagination and reality and try to blend the two. But for the most part, we're going to be strictly talking about human level combat, and not like, oh, I'm gonna blow your head off with a explosive. Like I've got.
Like you're not gonna have chainsaw for hands, you mean?
Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to emit like glycerol from my fingers and ignite it with the click of a finger.
So, Will, what kind of studios do you think are well versed in these types of Sakuga technical fight hand-to-hand combat scenes?
Just like we've broken down what we think are the fluffiest, the comfiest anime studios when it comes to animating slice of life, we've also got some real dark, gritty, knuckle-dusting studios that just make amazing fighting and action sequences in the world of close quarter combat and hand-to-hand fighting anime and manga. So I think the two that really kind of like stand head and shoulders above everyone, really, there is one that has come in more recently in the last 5 years, but I would say that pretty much at the top of it would be Wit Studio and Ufotable. It's kind of hard to knock those two because, yes, Wit Studio have kind of, diverged a bit and work on different kinds of stuff, like action comedy, action romance, and whatnot. But Ufotable has been like consistent in terms of the sort of work that they do. Very much action-based, very technical, but also like more on the spectacle side, especially when we talk about Ufotable. We've talked about fucking Demon Slayer. Let's not forget about our own personal favorites, Garden of Sinners. Right?
My God, that Garden of Sinners is going to be one of those shows, one of those long-running series where we will not stop talking about, because it is just so worth your time and investment to just check it out.
If it gets on streaming, if you're able to get the DVDs and whatnot,
hey, we paid up for it, so
and it was fucking worth it. Yeah, and then let's not forget the Fate series as well. Fate Stay Night, Fate Zero, Limited Blade Works.
I mean, when I showed you that Tsukahime
trailer for the visual novel, right?
Yeah, like the remake of the visual novel, I lost my mind. I watched it like 3 times because there was like that action scene. I was just like, yeah, okay. I'll shut the fuck up. You guys are good.
Yeah.
God damn it.
And then if we go on to the Wit Studios side, Attack on Titan seasons 1 through 3, Cabaneri of the Iron Fortress, they had some really good fights as well. Vinland Saga season 1, Vivi, Florid Eyes Song, Ranking of Kings, Spy X Family. All of them have very good combat sequences. And what's great about these two specific studios is, yes, they're renowned in terms of producing really good quality work. But the notable thing about these two specific studios is that every year, they don't work on more than 2 productions. They usually work on one thing at a time, or they have 2 teams split up to work on 2 separate things. It's notable, for example, that Spy X Family, whilst it was with Studio, they also worked in conjunction with Cloverworks because they were still working on other things at the same time as well. So that's pretty much like going down to the whole budgeting thing. Yes, they might have gotten a lot of money to work on that stuff, but it also meant that they were able to consolidate the resources to focus on one amazing thing or 2 really great things.
So speaking of personnel and manpower, I think in the realm of obviously anime, but also manga, it is extremely difficult to find someone with a level of expertise that is able to kind of structure or choreograph a fight scene, right? I mean, for example, going back to The Matrix, you could find a lot of choreographers that can do fight scenes in live action. There's just a lot of demand for people in that realm. But in anime and manga, at least, I'm not saying that they don't exist, because obviously they do, but I would say way less so, right?
It's not that... It's a very unique skill set, you know, especially when it comes to...
somewhat limited, too.
I mean, like... Would you rather be a studio that makes one amazing production? Like, let's say you make Attack on Titan season 3, or you could be JC Staff and make 5 productions in a year. You could be Cloverworks and make 7 productions in a year, and all those works can be either really good or kind of meh. But you know, you're also like pumping out consistent work. But you'll also notice that in terms of like the animation quality, whilst it might look beautiful, it's not like super like exquisite and bombastic. And not to knock on Cloverworks, it looks great. But let's be real, right?
Yeah.
You're comparing with Studio and Cloverworks and Ufotable. They're not the same.
And I am not an industry insider, but I know, at least looking at behind the scenes videos of live actions, that when you choreograph an action scene, it is a painstaking process. It's not just, smooth, let's just bang this out. Okay, you hit them, stop, let's just go. It's actually very time consuming and lengthy. And I can only imagine that the process within anime or manga, if you want to really take it to the level of expertise that some of these shows that we will be recommending later on in this episode, it's really, really hard.
Yeah. Another studio that I wanted to bring up before talking about like the main 2 that like I think we can have some good discussions about is Bones. So Bones had done like Space Dandy, they've done Noragami, they also did My Hero Academia, Bungo Stray Dogs, I believe.
So why not Mappa? I'm just curious.
I'm not going to Mappa yet.
Oh, my bad, right? My bad. Sorry.
You would have seen it in the docket. Yeah, I caught you there. But Bones is like really, really good too. But it's hard to like really knock on Bones. But like if you were to compare like the animation quality from Ufotable and Wit Studio to Bones, like Bones has got Mob Psycho, they got My Hero Academia, Bloodcade Battlefront, BBB. They all look really sick too, but I would kind of just
They're all fantastical though.
And I would kind of give the gold medal to Ufotable and Rit Studio. They can be on the podium themselves, right? But Bones definitely worth a mention here. Now, before we go into the big one that you just mentioned there, I kind of wanted to have a special mention of Studio Orange.
Yeah.
Because there's not many studios that do good 3D.
Oh, no, and Polygon Pictures is a very fine animation studio, Will. What are you talking about?
Well, I mean, let's be real. Like, as much as they are a good studio, they're not a great studio.
I like to knock on Polygon Pictures, but I do think they produce very solid 3D works. But unfortunately, in my honest opinion, it doesn't. It pales in comparison to Studio Orange. It really does.
Yeah. You can sit in your high chair as long as you want.
Trigun Stampede was pretty nice.
Did you finish past episode 2?
No, but it looked pretty nice. Did I stutter? I said it looked nice.
Yeah, okay, sure. But like again, Orange, renowned for not only making really good animation, but making really good use of CGI and 3D animation. And it's very rare in anime and manga, like extremely rare to get good 3D anime. And because a lot of people have, tried and failed. Or they've tried and got mediocre reception. I'm not going to be sitting here and saying that Polygon Pictures is an amazing studio. They have done some good work, but it's it doesn't necessarily hold a candle up to the level of quality you see. I mean, look, Land of the Lustrous, Beastars, Orange is really fucking good. I mean, what's your take in terms of like the use of pure 3D in animating action sequences, particularly like in the short instances of us watching the revamped Trigun Stampede, in terms of both of us watching some of Beastars and watching all of what's out for Land of the Lustrous, like would you say that like it's also one of those incomparable situations between Studio Orange and Wit or Studio Orange and Ufotable, because the spectacle's there? I mean, some of the fights in Land of the Lustrous are amazing.
I think one of the things that, in my opinion, Studio Orange does really well is the implementation of 3D in terms of how, quote-unquote, the camera movement pans, right? With Trigun, even with Beastars and even with Land of the Lustrous, the camera moves very dynamic, as if it's like traveling with the characters, very much akin to like a one-take like shot.
It makes it almost feel like it's filming a live action.
Exactly. And when you compare that to everything that is not 3D, generally it is almost like extremely difficult, borderline impossible, or very expensive, right? We think of things like A1 Pictures and Sword Art Online, for example. Some of those scenes are very dynamic, and it's similar in terms of like philosophy or vibe, right? But it just is not that feasible when you can have a 3D space as a 3D anime and literally maybe show different angles and determine, oh, this angle is better than that angle, whereas in a 2D space, you literally have to rely on the main storyboard, and that's all you can stick to it. Now, maybe that's not the case, but at least that's how I feel is at least more similar to how I would envision that process to be.
Yeah. I mean, like, for sure, when it comes to like animating 2D anime and animating CGI/3D anime, it's very clear that one takes a whole lot more work and manpower to be able to achieve greatness as opposed to the inverse.
Yeah, and when it's hybrid, it's even harder.
It's harder to choreograph and storyboard. You got to really figure out like how are you going to blend those two without it being too jarring, right? There's always going to be a juxtaposition between the usage of 3D and 2D within one specific episode. But if you're going to use it, you got to know how to make it work.
I mean, I just think that in Land of the Lustrous, the scenes that involve Diamond, whether it was her traversing in the very early parts of the season to that very infamous fight scene that she has, it is something that, in my opinion, is impossible to be done in 2D, or at least not that well implemented. And that's just the benefits of 3D.
Well, yeah. And also the fact that we haven't seen it in 2D as well. But I think you and I would imagine, like, if it was to be animated in 2D, it probably wouldn't work.
It would be really, really difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the bar's already been set, right? To be able to deconstruct all that and make it into a 2D format, it's not going to be easy. And speaking of not going to be easy, it also explains why Studio Orange don't release stuff very often. They only release stuff once every year, once every 2 years. I mean, there was a gap between like Beastar and Beastars 2. There's a gap between working on Beastars 2 and releasing Trigun Stampede. Beastars 2 is now coming out in 2024.
I think it's third season, right? Not
final season.
Final season. Yeah, third season. Yeah. But it's just like, they can take their sweet time because regardless of how I feel about Trigun Stampede,
it looks sick.
It is awesome, especially like for that first episode when he uses that bullet to ricochet. I'm just gonna say that. Now I won't say how it's being used. It was a very.
I mean, I'll say it. Bulletstorm.
Yeah, fucking majestic. Yeah. It really is done extremely well.
Yep. Now we got to get into probably the most controversial and contentious studio that's on this list. I don't know why we're doing a list, but we're just going to list them anyway. Mappa Studio. Now, they have not stopped working ever since they took on board the project of Attack on Titan final season. And since then, they've just been steamrolling with a bunch of works to the point where it's like, the reason why it's hard to sort of put them up as the gold standard is because of the amount of controversy and bad news that comes out from that studio, ranging from the criticisms of the quality in Attack on Titan Final Season Part 1,
which I don't think is that bad,
but then to the allegations of overwork and lack of pay and
hella
lack
bad
of sleep,
Yep.
right?
Did someone do a wellness check? We need to get someone on that, please.
Yeah, I think we checked in maybe like 2-3 months ago. No one's gotten back to us yet. So please, if you hear from us, Morse code works too. If you don't want to send anything, you don't want to leave any paper trail. But look, they have worked on a fuck ton of stuff. It is not just Attack on Titan, right? We're talking about Banana Fish, Dororo, Dorohedoro, God of High School, Jujutsu Kaisen, the Eta 10 Deities Only Peace, Attack Op Destiny, Chainsaw Man, Vinland Saga Season 2, which they also took from Wit Studio, and currently running Hell's Paradise. All of them look great. All of them look fantastic. But
what about JJK?
JJK as well, like they're
no, I mean,
as a Jujutsu Kaisen after God of High School.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah,
I really do like God of High School. I have a soft spot for it though.
But like the thing is, and it was actually like kind of clear as well when you compare Vinland Saga Season 2 and Attack on Titan Final Season in comparison to the original studio, which is Wit Studio who had done it previously. It's noticeable in terms of like the drop in quality. It's not a massive drop, but you can definitely tell that, something's not quite the same anymore. And you can say that I'm being nitpicky, but it's just down to sometimes the animation's not being as smooth as when it was at Wit Studio. And I feel that that's kind of the same with some of the other stuff they do. And it really just comes down to working on like 3-4 projects all in one go, just not having enough people to be able to work with short deadlines.
Yeah, and playing devil's advocate, at least with Attack on Titan specifically, I think Wit Studio had it down pat, because they had so many episodes to work on, whether it's their system or the way of doing things, such that when you then hand it off to Mappa, who has a large number of large number of personnel, but also a large number of projects, sometimes a lot of the craftsmanship is not necessarily lowered, but it is dispersed into all of these different projects instead of like the 1 or 2 projects that maybe an animation studio would typically have, right? And I mean, you can't get Yumo Paint like on like 50,000 different projects. You can get them on maybe 2 or 3, right?
Yeah. Imagine like you say, we're going to do 5 Matrix movies in one go. Okay, I'm not going to be working on all 5 of them. I can work on one of them, and you'll notice that there's going to be a difference between that one Matrix movie and the other 4.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not necessarily a knock per se, but it is like a noticeable difference. I would definitely agree with that for sure.
Yeah. So I think that mostly wraps up the studios that we wanted to highlight in this particular section. Look, there's going to be other studios that also, look, like the old school Madhouse was also pretty sick too, right? There's going to be like some stuff that comes up from like Tatsunoko Productions or Dogakobo or Cloverworks that would also look really sick too. But I think that when it comes to talking about Mappa, Wit Studio, Ufotable, Orange, Bones, they all have very noticeable works that just look awesome, right? I think
think about One Punch Man Season 1 and One Punch Man Season 2. Like that is maybe not necessarily the fairest.
Yeah, it's just like painfully obvious, right?
Right, but it does highlight the whole action scene in terms of a different studio having a different take or necessarily a different way of doing things, maybe even up to the budget or the craftsmanship, or just being able to output the same level of demand and quality that is expected and sometimes unfairly expected, right? So it is an extreme case, but that just highlights kind of the contrast between a studio that maybe has one project and has to scrounge up and really pour their blood, sweat, and tears, and the other have 50,000 things. And oh, by the way, we should put more resources into Railgun. Oh, yeah, we totally should.
Yeah. So of those 5 studios, Bones, UFO Table, Wit Studio, Orange, and Mappa, would you crown a champion amongst the 5 of producing some of the best fighting / action sequences, or do you just feel that it's just like there's no comparison because they're all good at doing their own specific thing?
I mean, it is extremely difficult because
you can't really talk about Mappa without talking about what studios, since 2 of their biggest properties, which was Finland Saga and Attack on Titan, both of them have shared history amongst Mappa and Wood Studio.
And personal bias to Studio Orange aside, right? It's almost exclusively 3D anime compared to everyone else, which is
but also like one specific series, which is Land Illustrious, right?
Exactly. I mean, I do think Beastars do look fantastic, and Trigun Stampede does look fantastic, but
who did Gantz? Was it Polygon Pictures?
Gantz? Holy shit! I don't remember. Like, I think Gantz Zero is like the
one that's
3D,
on Netflix.
Yeah. But I think the old school Gantz, like the really old one, I don't even remember. Oh, I'm pissed off about Gantz, to be honest, in terms of how it was treated. Maybe less so with Gantz Zero because it actually is okay.
Gantz Zero was Digital Frontier. That was a production company.
But what about the anime series Gantz?
That one was done by Gonzo.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
I mean, no, actually, Gonzo is still
around. But I mean,
let's talk about right before the break. So this is going to be like the worst time, but I'm just going to lay it out there. We like Records of Ragnarok a shit ton.
The manga.
What do we think about?
We will talk about it a bit more in the second half, but yeah, I totally did not vibe with the first season. In fact, it was basically like whenever I saw a lot of YouTubers doing watch-alongs of Record of Ragnarok, it was more laughs than cheers because of the fact that the animation quality was just comically bad. But
okay, I know my number
pinnacle,
one
okay,
UFO Table, 100%.
It's hard.
Since Garden of Sinners, all the way till like for a video game of Tsukihime, all the way till Demon Slayer, it is undoubtedly.
How dare you forget about Fate Stay Night? Well, not Fate Stay Night, but Fate like Unlimited
Blade Works. Yeah, sure.
And Fate Zero.
But
yeah, they're basic. They're just fucking good.
What's the third route called? Third route.
Heaven's End or Heaven's something.
Heaven's End. It's not Heavenly Delusions.
No, definitely not. Which is also good too.
I mean, it's the trilogy of movies, right?
Production IG. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I do want to give a special shout out to another studio that we have not
Heaven's
mentioned.
Feel.
Heaven's Feel. Thank you. There is it's not Studio Trigger, by the way, as the studio that I'm talking about. It's Studio Kafka.
Oh yeah.
So they did the Evangelion remakes, and those look fucking dope. I mean, the original Evangelion is still timeless classic. Like it's fantastic, right? But the remakes are just so good too. They look good. I mean, I have not really watched it all the way through. I don't want to like lose my mind.
Yeah. You want to end your thoughts there and then go into a break?
Yeah.
All right. We're going to come back with some more discussions about combat in anime and manga, and also list some series that we think would be worth checking out.
Wait, are you going to fight me about it?
No, I'm not going to fight you about it. Unless you start talking shit about my favorite Kengan Ashura character.
Well, then let's fight. Everybody to the second half of episode 58 of the Good Anime Palette podcast. Will is over here checking out his screens. I am over here looking at Will checking out his screens.
Why are you going to talk about my screens, man? You know my screen broke down. it was so heartbreaking. Literally the other day, you know what I was watching? I was watching Shigurui, which we're going to be talking about later today, and then halfway through an episode, all of a sudden my screen just blew out, and had to move away from my large curved monitor to now using a regular ass 1080p monitor. Sad days.
Sad.
But at least I got it, returned, and also they're going to be sending me a new one. So
Yeah, because it's within warranty, right?
very lucky it was within the warranty. I was only 4 months away from the warranty being busted. So yeah. Heartbreak aside, we are going to be going into the second half of today's discussion. We went over some studios, some definitions and breakdowns of what the fuck we're talking about, and now we're going to go into some specific anime fight sequences that maybe even talk about some manga stuff too, that Jason and I have experienced. Again, just to remember as well, Jason himself is not a mixed martial arts practitioner, nor am I a MMA expert, but I am a massive fan of the combat sports, and Jason's also taking part in some training, being able to help people weight cut and all that. That stuff is actually super gruesome. So yeah, props
it's
to
just
you.
kind of gross.
A lot of garbage bags, a lot of like hot tubs, a lot of saunas.
Not hot tubs, but saunas plus extra layers of sweatshirts.
So let's throw a garbage bag on top of that too. Get on the fucking like a cycling bike,
elliptical
or
machine. Yeah, definitely. All that. It is an extremely personally very dangerous for your health, honestly.
Before we even there is like they're actually not an anime related thing, but there is actually like a doctor, or at least someone that has a doctorate in sports science, that actually decided to undergo weight cutting himself to show how bad the effects of weight cutting is. It's actually a very insightful but also like kind of shocking video to watch, because damn, that guy puts himself in some real serious situations. Like he has one of those sort of like chambers which legitimately it's just basically a massive sauna within the lab, and yeah, the extremes they go into. Have you ever seen anybody with a weight cut gone bad?
No, thankfully, because I was always like right there. And obviously, I wasn't the only one that's right there with the athletes, right? So I'm not to say like, oh, I am the sole person that helped, mitigate some of the potential pitfalls that comes from cutting water weight.
Like, what's the term for like when someone like legitimately dehydrates so much to the point that they have like an electrolyte deficiency? Like something happens with like their body, like their nervous system, because of the lack of electrolytes.
Oh shit!
But that's
hypotoxicity.
That's like through the lack of water in your body, right? To regulate your actual bodily functions and whatnot. There's a term for it.
Yeah. Fuck. I actually don't know offhand. But
okay, but we mean we're not talking about medical science here. We're talking about anime and manga, so you'll be forgiven for not remembering it on the top of your head. So let's just go straight into some of the more notable combat and fighting sequences and scenes that we have seen in anime.
Is it like hyperthermia?
Hypothermia
is due to heat.
I thought that's hyperthermia. Hypo wouldn't be.
I said hyper.
Oh yeah, okay. Because
hypo is the cold.
But then like would that then be in conjunction with the lack of water in your body as well?
Yes, I think it is due to the imbalance of, as you said, electrolytes due to, in the case of like, for example, being in a sauna, like
extreme dehydration,
heat. Yeah. Because usually heat leads to dehydration.
Yeah, you know how like they
osmosis.
You know how they have those like crazy sauna competitions up in like Northern Europe where they legitimately sit in like there's some hardcore people to the point where they kind of, some of them unfortunately push past their limits and like, to the point of no return. Rest in peace, those ones.
Shit.
Yeah, it's gruesome. Yeah, let's switch back into some more rosier stuff in terms of anime and manga. So, you know, not a practitioner in martial arts. Me, haven't done it in a long time, but
just because I'm Asian doesn't mean I know kung fu.
Yeah, let's be clear, right? I don't know kung fu. I know taekwondo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I don't know kung fu.
And I do know that taekwondo is not Japanese.
Yeah, thank fuck. Good.
Yeah. karate, okay, is Japanese.
Yeah, it's almost actually kind of like
Judo is Japanese.
It's actually kind of discriminatory as well, where it's like, oh, you're Asian, you know karate, right? It's like, oh no, that's not.
Do you know how many times I've heard like, oh, is it like kung fu fighting? You know that song, Jason? Oh yeah. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, thank you.
How many Bruce Lee's, Jackie Chan's?
Oh yeah,
or
wax
Jet Li's
on, wax off, motherfucker. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Last Karate Kid.
First of all, Mr. Miyagi's Japanese. I'm Chinese, you know.
Yeah, exactly, right? But hey, that was a pretty good movie, actually.
Yeah. So we've watched. I mean, let me ask you a serious question, Jason. You've watched a lot of anime, right?
I would like to think. Is this like the equivalent of me asking you, hey,
you like
Will,
anime,
you
right?
like anime, right? You like manga, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, right. I watch a lot of anime, Will.
And whilst you definitely have a preferred genre or theme in terms of the sort of anime you like to watch, there's definitely been a lot of shonens, a lot of actions that you've watched that you're like, damn, that shit was fucking sick.
So I actually wanted to kind of spring this on you unexpectedly, but you kind of segued into it for me, which is I am obviously someone that is not well versed even in the technical elements, even in terms of MMA. I'm just not. I don't know like the different holds. I don't even know like I know there are different weight classes, but I don't know like what from what weight to what weight. I know some stuff, but the point is in the realm of anime and manga. For me, the choreography of it is not necessarily always a thing that I gravitate towards when it comes to action scenes. You don't necessarily
go through like the technical analysis, but you kind of embrace the spectacle of it.
Yes. I mean, in many ways, like if you were to swing swords, and then that's it, but then it is done well, to me, it is something that I can at least very much appreciate like easily. Whereas with some of the shows that we're going to be talking about, it is extremely difficult for me to get that extra level of appreciation because I just don't have that knowledge, even with a narrator kind of giving me the short and skinny of certain things, right? It's just very different when you are either more personally invested or you just have more context, right? But it is very easy for me to kind of assume like, oh, it's superpower. So it's within the realm, or with My Hero Academia, it's within the realm of the fantasy. So it is trying to ask for something very, very realistic is like a different thing entirely.
It's the same I would assume for like the general anime manga fan as well. They're not going to be watching a fight scene and being like, oh, wow, that fucking like headlock was sick. Oh, that heel hook was fucking slick.
Yeah, I'm not a swordsman. I don't know if that fight choreography between these two samurais is authentic or not, but it looks good. It looks kind of cool. But to me, the know-how is lost on me.
Yeah, but I mean, again, you're not exposed to those techniques. You've never used it yourself. It's not going to be something that you're going to be looking out for when you're watching these kinds of fighting or action sequences, right? More often than not, you're going to be like, that was a sick-ass punch. That was a really cool sort of brawl between two super overpowered human beings or demons or whatever it may be.
But that being said, some of the shows that we're talking about is very much grounded in concepts that I can always get behind, like the underdog story or fighting until your last dying breath or going against all odds, David versus Goliath type.
Calling upon the power of friendship, that kind of stuff, right?
Listen, Naruto made so many friends along the way and saved so many people doing it, right?
Why don't we start with Naruto then? In terms of Naruto, like, look, over 700 episodes between Naruto and Shippuden, a load of movies in between, and now if you want to include, in terms of canon, the Boruto stuff as well. As much as it gets memed, they've got some really amazing fight sequences.
I can spoil a bit of Naruto, right? It's been like fucking ages, right?
Dude,
not even Shippuden. I'm talking about OG Naruto.
You could spoil whatever the hell you want in Naruto because I don't believe that anybody that's listening to this right now or anybody who will in the future has not read or watched Naruto.
I think that there is a very long, drawn-out sequence that is awesome that involves Sasuke and Naruto versus, I forgot the tall dude's name, but I think the boy is called Haku.
Oh, like okay, legitimately like
with
deep
the mirrors,
deep early in the Haku.
yeah. So there was like the mirror and water, and the whole sequence of a certain, I don't know what do you call that large ass shuriken that is like a windmill. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Let's just call it a shuriken for now.
Shuriken windmill, something like that. Yeah, that whole sequence is so well done, and also has so much choreography behind it, especially like at that time when I watched it and I didn't really understood a lot of like, like holds, grappling, I didn't even know the difference between a hook and a jab at the time. But I can at least appreciate, be like, yo, that's some sick ass shit. That is dope. Obviously everyone goes to the Rock Lee Garu fight. Like there's no doubt in a Gara fight. There's no doubt in my mind that is extremely like the pinnacle of Naruto fight scenes, right? And I guess also Naruto and Sasuke's infamous fight scene at the end of Naruto before Shippuden.
Zabuza, Momochi, and Haku. Those are the two people they were fighting.
Yeah,
in that really cool sequence. It lasted like 3 episodes.
Brutal, dude. Like and especially in the manga when they show like the, I don't know, what do you call it? Not needles, but it's like chopstick length needles.
Yeah, the needles, yeah.
Like for acupuncture, that kind of thing. Like it goes through like their arms and shit. I was like, dude, that's fucking brutal. Because it's not like an arm chopped off. It's like it's in the body. It's lodged there. It's just so memorable to me growing up, reading and then watching Naruto at the time. And I don't remember that much about Dragon Ball Z. Of course, there are plenty of hype moments, but there were more of like, I'm just going to power the fuck up and it's going to be super hype versus like an actual drawn out battle. And it went on forever, as you said, right?
Yeah.
And it just never, it was just like, it was tense.
Yeah. But again, that would be more on like spectacle as opposed to like fighting technique and whatnot, right?
Yeah, I don't really remember like.
What about Rock Lee and Kimimaro? The drunken fist out in the field. Rock Lee and Gaara, even though Gaara is super powerful with his ninjutsu and genjutsu, that you have to just see the spectacle of Rock Lee taking off his leg weights, dropping them.
I mean, yeah, of course, that scene is like number one.
Best fight.
Best shonen classic fight scene.
Like that would be like ranking top 3 at the very least for most people. We're talking about like most classic, greatest shonen fighting sequences of all time.
Absolutely, 100%. I think that is without a shadow of a doubt, in my mind at least.
Yeah. So for sure you might have your own favorite. I mean, there's so many, dude, over 700 episodes of Naruto across with Shippuden as well. There's bound to be a different favorite fight for everybody.
But with the Haku fight, it was so early on to have it really, it's almost like as you were watching it just looked painful.
Yeah. But again, though, is the experience of it watching from a fighting perspective or more from like a sort of more mental, emotional perspective? Because a lot of it was also just it was
a bit of both in that case.
Because let's be real, a lot of it was just straight up physical torture.
Yeah, but I think that was like one of the scenes that I remember, at least like growing up in the early anime consumption career, where it is unforgettable.
And it also just shows you as well, it's like it doesn't have to be like amazingly beautiful. You're just watching two people struggle to the extreme in terms of facing against an opponent they legitimately do not have a strategy for. And watching that struggle was like, whoa, shit got really fucking real. Like, I knew that watching Naruto was a lot of like gimmicks and sort of slapstick stuff, especially with Kakashi and Naruto training and Sasuke being a mopey emo kid and Sakura still being useless and all that. But then you see the Haku and Zabuza fight. Holy fuck.
It was all fun and games until then.
It was a fight of attrition. It was just like, who is going to die first? It's not like who's going to win. It's more just, are we about to watch two kids who just got out of ninja training and legitimately suffer one of the most painful deaths you can see, which is like literally death by 1,000 needles?
Actually, yeah, that That's that that kind of idiom is extremely accurate of that situation.
And
So
even though they're fighting in like a pretty open space, the way that Haku uses the mirrors, those ice mirrors as well,
to like isolate them,
straight up,
and
that's
that water prison,
that's a
that
close
Kakashi
quarter
was in.
combat environment right there. That's straight up prison right there.
I mean, there's so many elements of that scene.
Man, he didn't bring that up. I would have forgotten about that. Fuck, that is an amazing scene actually.
Yeah, because imagine like I mean, look, I have not died before. Okay,
Hopefully never.
I mean, eventually
Stop it.
pass away, right?
Stop it.
But I hear like from a lot of people, and just my knowledge of the human body, drowning is probably one of the worst ways to go. And when you involve like a scene where someone is literally in a bubble water prison, like holy shit, right? Then not being able to do much because you're a fucking kid, then having needles stuck through you, having this scary ass motherfucker and this like effeminate looking boy just wrecking shit and not really knowing what the fuck to do because the one guy, your sensei, is incapacitated or like, in that water prison, like time is of the essence. So it is such a really well done scene in almost a lot of aspects. That's like my number 2 Naruto scene, even if you include Shippuden.
Yeah, like there's so much to pick from, but I think the 3 that I mentioned, the ones that you specifically brought up as well, like those will be like in memory for sure.
Who's Rock Lee's sensei? Guy? When he does the doors,
that was just ridiculous. That was sick.
That's like number 3, I think, in my opinion.
Because it was also, there's a lot of emotion attached to that too. Just watching this guy legitimately, and it comes with the space of fighting as well. It's pushing past that mental barrier to be able to not necessarily gain a power up. Of course, within the world of Naruto, yeah, taijutsu, ninjutsu, genjutsu, none of that shit exists in real life. But to sort of see them personify, like looking at someone with their back against the wall and looking at nothing but their own mental grit to be able to break those shackles and actually go beyond their own physical limitations. That was
heaven, right?
That was emotionally breaking.
Yeah, it was draining after finishing that arc. It was like a sigh of relief and just like I am sitting down, but I need to like lay down,
Yeah.
So I went off a bit about the Haku scene in Naruto, but it really was one of the first instances of, oh shit, like the anime is not always just fun games and cute girls doing cute things anymore.
Yeah.
Like, okay, even Yu Yu Hakusho and Dragon Ball Z did not have that same amount of impact on me than that scene.
Damn. And those are 2 classics as well.
I mean, Bleach even more so. I don't think Bleach, to me, carries that much weight in a lot of the scenes. Not saying that there isn't.
It didn't seem like a lot of them had a lot.
They're
like,
not memorable
on the line, like whereas like legitimately you're watching Naruto and Sasuke pretty much like be on the verge of death within like the first 2 curves, which is like what the fuck. We just got introduced to these 2 characters.
It's PTSD, like I am done for the rest of my life type level of trauma.
Yeah, and that's something that we don't necessarily like focus on as well, like the PTSD, the emotional and mental fallout from engaging in these fighting sequences, these combat sequences. Like, whoa, these kids have gone through hell, and that was legitimately like their first mission out of the Hidden Leaf Village.
Yeah. Yes, actually, yes.
Fucking terrifying, right?
It is like, welcome to the harsh reality of the Naruto real world setting, guys. That kind of thing. So, I really like that Haku scene. Like, it's that whole sequence is awesome.
Yeah. Why don't we get a little bit more depressing and go into Attack on Titan? I'm sorry. I know the cops are really annoyed by that, but yeah. We got to talk about AOT because if we talked about Wit Studio previously and Mappa, it'd be kind of sacrilegious if we're not just to mention a couple of scenes from Attack on Titan. Now, there's plenty of scenes that involve the usage of the air maneuver gears, human fighting Titans in tandem to be able to incapacitate, potentially kill Titans as well. And this is something that I showed you about like 3-4 weeks ago. where there's, I mean, this is a special shout out. We will put the credits in our notes as well, to a YouTube channel called Scenic Fights. They're a group of guys who are themselves martial art practitioners, some experts as well, who break down fighting scenes in anime, manga, as well as live action and some, other animated series as well. So shout out to those guys because they did a really great breakdown on some of the fights that take place in some of the series we're going to be mentioning later on today. So specifically within Attack on Titan, like outside of the one that I've already written down on the docket, was there a lot of sort of memorable fighting combat scenes in there? I mean, of course, there's like the original fights between like Anna and Eren when they're tussling and turfing down in the city, especially when Eren tries to kill her and then she ices up. There's fights between Eren Yeager and the other people's. I keep forgetting that guy's name. Because of the R, I think.
Let me think for a sec. I would say without really mentioning too much into spoilers, a running in the forest.
Bro, Attack on Titan released like 10 years ago. As long as you're not talking about final season, then
I think Anna running in the forest,
yeah.
I think is a very enclosed, in many ways considered like close quarter combat. Is there any hand-to-hand? Not really, but it is navigating a space with the tools that you have and the weapons and in many ways the arms and trying to escape. It was a chase scene. People were dying.
I wouldn't count that as a close quarter combat though.
Yeah, I guess it's more of like a chase sequence, to be fair.
But I mean, still engaging as fuck.
Let me think for a sec. Oh shit, I do know something. When they were isolated in that tower.
Oh, yes. And all the Titans start like enclosing on them, right?
Before they got saved, which was dope, by the way. But that whole sequence was so like claustrophobic, nerve-wracking. Because it was just like...
Now that is close quarter combat.
Like how are they going to get out of this? It's like fucking impossible. And they kind of had is it called like a MacGuffin? Or like a, saved at the last second type scenario. But that whole sequence was extreme. Because I also think it took place at night.
Yep.
So that adds the extra level of lack of visibility.
It was just legitimately a scene full of desperation. Right, like looking at what the fuck they're going to be able to do to get out of this tower. I think even then, like their air maneuver gear had they ran out of supplies. They legitimately couldn't do anything, and they were just like trying to hold out for as long as possible for someone to come and save them. Because that was literally it. That was like their last hope.
Yeah, they were gonna. Yeah, like I think that scene was extremely well done as well. I mean, there's so many scenes that are extremely well done, but yeah, I think those stand out, especially in the earlier seasons.
Yeah. The one that was broken down by Scenic Fights, which was the fight between Eren Yeager as the Attack Titan and between Reiner Braun as the Armored Titan, that was sick because that was when like it wasn't just Titans eating humans or air maneuver gear streaming through the air and slashing the napes of these Titans' necks. This was pure hand-to-hand, close quarter combat, straight up using every technique out of the book to be able to take down and incapacitate their opponent, from leg locks to shimmying to Dewey rolls, all the way down to leg locks. Man, that was some really, really cool stuff. Admittedly, though, when I first watched it, I didn't necessarily notice a lot of the technique.
So for me, I think that scene is well done, but I was like, okay, they're really brawling. That's really the most I got out of it from like a technical aspect. But it was really well done. But the holds and all that stuff, it just didn't. It
was all very precise. It was you could definitely tell that, like, when watching this wasn't just animators and a storyboarder just putting together something. No, they legitimately had someone choreographing this from the background and just putting together a very clean combat sequence.
And that YouTube video that you showed me of Scenic Fights was dope.
because they legitimately tell you every single hold, every single lock, every maneuver that they make to be able to gain like momentum and position themselves to be able to incapacitate their opponent. Oof, good fights. That's not the only fight, of course. There's plenty of good fights in Attack on Titan, but for me, like from a technical standpoint, that was the pinnacle. From a spectacle standpoint, though, I mean, there's just too many to count from. Another one that we wanted to maybe sort of go into, where maybe not so much like purely like fantastical, like amazing fights, but like some that has good grounding and good technique, but also just pure enjoyment out of watching those scenes, which is from Spy X Family. So when it comes to watching the main characters of Lloyd and Yor, and also with Anya, given their backgrounds and working in espionage and assassinations, you know that they've also got a lot of combat training and experience behind them. And so when you're watching Yor taking down like perpetrators who have kidnapped Anya, or Lloyd trying to navigate and escape from pursuers, or even chasing down would be evildoers and whatnot, there's a lot of good fighting. But I think the fight that happened between drunk Yor and sober Lloyd when they were at that castle, that was fun to watch.
It was extremely brief, but it was very much like it was super obvious that, okay, this is extremely different than your typical espionage, your typical fight scene, whereas it's like, oh, okay, they're actually like almost martial arts fighting in many ways, like brawling,
employing combinations, using jabs, straights, hooks, uppercuts,
dodges.
Yeah, like rolling up the head, putting up your arms to be able to cover both the temples on your head, your chin down in there, and also like being able to have your elbows down enough so that you don't get like liver shots and whatnot. Those are great. Then, of course, I think the most amazing fighting scene in all of Spy X Family was Anya with that straight hook, torquing her hips, driving power from her knees,
because she
up.
She did a 180, and then just bam.
That is a lot of torque to be able to generate force. Because a lot of times when it comes to punching, a lot of times people think that it just comes from the arms. No, if you punch from your arms, you will tire out so fast.
It is all just like golf swings. It's all about the hips.
Yep.
It really is. Like it is a very common misconception, I guess, if you're not into the sport or into fighting, which hopefully you are not necessarily always getting into street fights or brawls, but yeah. It's all about the hips, man.
Now, there are a bunch of other ones that we might want to go over. So,
I do want to mention one. Garna Sinner's movie number 5 contains 2 very infamous, well choreographed close quarter combat scenes.
Elevator and corridor?
Correct.
Yeah. Oh, God. It's hard to spoil because it's super hard for anyone to watch it. But that was probably like the quietest we were watching this together. We were just like, what could we say?
Fucking
we were just awestruck.
Fucking get on Garna Sinners, guys. If you thought UFO Table was dope now, they were always dope even back then. And I would argue that a lot of Garna Sinners still looks just as good as shows today.
Yeah. And the fact that it came out like almost 15 years ago. I think it came out in the late 2000s. So definitely like a classic now in terms of how you want to define it.
I mean, Shiki is just fucking crazy.
Best girl? Or best girl you don't want to piss off?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Well, if she's into me, then we're all good, I guess.
Just don't forget to wash the dishes.
Yeah, exactly.
Or do the laundry.
Or get ice cream. Get it?
Yes. Yes. Oh, my God. Okay. Oh, man, I want to watch it again. So there are a bunch of other series that we could go into, like the Fate series, Samurai Champloo, and on that note as well, Cowboy Bebop had some good combats as well. My Hero Academia, we already talked about the
I think with Cowboy Bebop, the scene in the church.
Yeah.
Very good.
Very symbolic.
Very, very symbolic. But also it's just people take cover when they are in a firefight. Hello. Like, I know it's super obvious, but when they do that, extra level of detail. Like
it's one of those things where you're like, wow, they actually ground this in realism. I applaud you. And it's not just like, oh, people are shooting, I guess I'm gonna run towards them.
Yeah, because I'm a main character now, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Plot armor
Does not exist in Cowboy Bebop.
Exactly. So I really like a lot, especially the classic scenes from a lot of classic anime. Just don't have, are not. I mean, this may be a hot take. I don't see a lot of those level, at least that prevalent nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, generational change, right? People just don't really care for that much anymore.
And
just
it's
wanna see that
hard
stuff.
in a way, because how are you going to fit in that level of impact
and make it exciting.
in the isekai?
Yeah. Or like a shonen action or any sort of, contemporary anime and manga now, right?
They do exist, like, we're going to talk about them, but yeah, like, it's hard.
Yeah. There is one I do want to have a quick discussion with you about because it is a little bit spoilery considering it is a movie and kind of came out fairly recently.
So what is the property first?
Well, it's, Kizumonogatari, the Monogatari series.
Okay.
And it's Araragi versus Shinobu.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the stadium?
Yeah.
In the third movie?
Yeah. One of the most amazing fights I'd ever seen.
But not in a way that I think is very technical, though.
Not technical. It's more bombastic and ridiculous.
And Looney Tunes-esque.
It's literally the what the fuck is going on kind of thing,
Yeah. Awesome scene. And extremely crazy. Very much in the style that you would expect, in the same vein as the Monogatari series is known for. So
yeah. I think that pretty much covers some of the more notable combat and fighting sequences that we've experienced in anime and manga. Some that we do want to talk more about, but I think it's just either like not necessary or could enter into spoiler territory.
yeah, I went off too much on the Haku scene.
The Haku scene was cool though. I mean, the fact that you brought up too, like you didn't, like that was pretty much like erased from my memory. And now that it's back, I'm like, okay, fuck, I need to see that all over again. So now we're entering legitimately the final part of today's discussion, and I think the way that we're going to go about it is these aren't necessarily like full-on recommendations, like you have to go and watch it, but these are more sort of series
Other than Kengan Ashura, right?
Well, I mean, that's always going to be, on my bucket list. It never ends. But these are more sort of things that like we've noticed and we've wanted to sort of showcase. Some of them are definitely worth recommending, but it's very much up to you because there's going to be caveats with some of these series for sure. So we've broken this part down into 4 specific sections, one of which, again, these are not necessarily names we're going to stick by, but these ones are kind of categorized.
Yeah, we have to group
series.
them somehow, guys.
Yeah.
Come
so
on.
there's one which is, focusing on the blade, the way of the blade. So we talk about, for example, like Moribito, Blade of the Immortal, Sword of the Stranger, as well as Shigurui. And then we have other ones which we'll introduce later. Now, some of these you have watched, specifically Sword of the Stranger.
Yeah, that's the only one I've watched.
Right? So, but then you've actually watched it in full. Now, you
Yes.
did mention that story-wise, it's
Very meh.
kind of dull,
Extremely
right?
meh.
But the sword fights were like, whoa. I mean, even like the last fight, I think that was actually
The
like
last fight was like 45 minutes.
It was almost
insane.
like it was like a quarter to half of the movie, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is when they focus on the choreography and not quote unquote the spectacle, that's when you know that shit gets real, right? Like obviously it's grounded in quote unquote reality in historical Japan.
But you don't need spectacle to show how high stakes this is.
Exactly.
Right?
And it just is nonstop, right? And Sword of the Stranger is one of those like movies that I think is extremely flawed, but in the realm of sword fighting and choreography, it is A+. But when you take into consideration the whole story, it's like a 7, 8 kind of area, depending on how much you dig the action scenes, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's done by Bones, and Bones, at least from like a animation perspective, they do good work, right?
Oh, it's great.
It definitely shows in Sword of the Stranger. Now, the next 2 that we'll go over, because for myself, I only watched a few episodes, some clips. I don't think Jason's watched much or of any of these. Moribito, which was produced by Production IG, good studio, and Blade of the Immortal, done by Leiden Films, which is it's a hot and cold studio. So both of these, what you notice about these as well is specifically when it comes to a lot of these sword-based samurai-esque kind of series, they're more often like historical like set pieces. They're very much set in like the Taisho or Edo period, where because of the fact that the shogunate, just doesn't exist now, and samurais have been kind of outlawed since like the early 19th to mid 19th centuries. So you don't really see people walking around wearing with katanas in the left and all that. Unless you're a psycho, or you actually are,
or you're cosplaying,
or you actually,
and it's not a real blade,
or you actually, practice the way of the blade and you're, cutting bamboo shoots and whatnot. Which, by the way, you see those are fucking sick, but
also really hard to cut.
It's not easy.
It looks easy. It is not.
I mean, it's because these are masters and they make them look easy, right?
It's like kendo. Like you think it's like, oh, they just like whip the bamboo sword. It's just like no.
It takes years of training, and that's kind of what's like highlighted in like sort of The Stranger, Moribito, as well as Blade of the Immortal. I think in terms of like the choreography, Moribito and Blade of the Immortal, probably not on that level of sort of The Stranger, but there's definitely a lot of good classic like close quarter combats, a lot of good chase scenes, some very good like swordsmanship as well. The one I do want to highlight though would be Shigurui, because it's not what you expect in terms of looking at a very violent and gory sword-based anime set in like Edo period Japan, because it is gruesomely dark. It was done by Madhouse, I think around 10 years ago, maybe older than that. It is more like a mentally draining, emotionally debilitating psycho thriller, because they focus on a lot of backstory between how characters became evil and how characters kind of walk that thin line between what's gray, what's black, what's white.
The DVD and Blu-ray cover is just the most bloodiest.
Yeah.
It's just like the portrait of like, I guess like the two main characters, and it's just red for like half of the cover.
And it's definitely like a very good sort of personification of what the series will entail.
Oh Jesus. Oh, some of these screenshots look fucking brutal.
Yeah. It's definitely not for like weak stomachs.
Holy shit. Oh god.
But it also just accentuates the mental and emotional brutality that happens throughout the series. It's not going to be like action packed. It's not going to be crazy fighting like spectacle, but it is the observation of technique and honoring the tradition of the Bushido way.
I mean, I did not watch the show, but just by looking at the images of the manga and the anime, the screenshots on Google, I can just expect it is a heavy anime, as you said, right?
Yeah. It gets knocked on because of the fact that, whoa, dude, like there's a lot of like blood and gore. Why don't you focus on the blood and gore? And I think like that kind of just sort of misses the point in watching Shigurui, because it's definitely one of those where it's morality based, because a lot of times when you watch a series, you kind of wonder, oh, I wonder how many of these people are going to be, are going to end up becoming heroes or good people. No, this is more of show of watching how low a human can go in terms of depravity and immorality. And even the best people, even the nicest people, also have blood in their hands. It's definitely different from the other three series, but very much grounded in sort of understanding what it means to be a samurai of that era, because I think a lot of it is like based on certain characters actually like going through the process of wanting to abolish the process of becoming and having samurai in the shogunate. So it's definitely, it asks a lot of questions in terms of like where you stand on what it means to be a samurai to protect people, but at the same time seeing there's a lot of political backstabbing that
like
goes
the way
behind
of life.
Yeah.
The Bushido way, as you said, is like a philosophical like value principle mindset, right?
And then when philosophies clash,
exactly,
that's when like
or
shit
when it gets
real.
tested, right? What you thought you believed in is contested.
Do you seek to protect it, or do you seek to go down a different path and destroy everything that's made you the person you are now?
So now that we have talked a bit about realistic anime's portrayals of, the Bushido way, let's go to the extremely polar opposite and talk about just the most fantastical
Beautiful,
powers.
gorgeous. I mean, beyond like actual realism, but there's
And
still,
this is my wheelhouse now. Like, as in, like, is sort of the things that at least I can comprehend more so, like, easily at least, right? And the two shows is Fire Force and God of High School.
both of which you've watched.
Yep.
Well, I've watched some of Fire Force. I've watched a lot of God of High School. Didn't finish it though. I think
I
like,
finished it.
I think
And
episode 7.
and for Fire Force, because there was like what, like
3 seasons, or
yeah, and I think each are like double curves. It's a
oh,
lot.
wow, it's chunky. Okay,
Yeah, it's like 50 episodes or something. I don't hold me to that, but there's at least 3-4 curves. I'm pretty sure. And I like both of them quite a bit. I think Fire Force is way better than God of High School, but they both are very much like relevant to the discussion of, close quarter hand-to-hand combat sometimes even.
So both of them have their criticisms, or at least like things that people don't necessarily like about him. I mean, like God of High School, it's pretty apparent. I think people just weren't very happy about the character designs.
Yep.
The story was kind of weak as it kind of deviated away from the original source.
So it's like the God of High School is based off of the webtoon, and it is one of these
you're so
Crunchyroll
close.
originals.
48 episodes for Fire Force.
Damn.
So close.
So God of High School, I think the webtoon has ended like completely, but nonetheless, it is Mappa production. It is
It shows. It definitely shows.
Crunchyroll exclusive or Crunchyroll original, I think.
Yeah,
and Fire Force
as part of that treble of webtoon adaptations, which included
Noblesse.
and Tower of God.
Yep. And only Tower of God got a second season. So what does that tell you about a lot of things, huh?
Tower God's good.
Tower of God is good.
Tower of Good. Yeah.
Bam, bam. Okay. And Fire Force, done by probably one of Will's favorite studios, David Productions, right?
Very unique. Yeah, on its own.
And-
Nothing does any. No, I'll stop.
So why would I kind of recommend these two shows? I would recommend Fire Force over God of High School, but I think God of High School is at least a much more grounded take, even though there's fantastical powers of sorts, with some level of choreography.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the fact that like a lot of there's a lot of like taekwondo masters in there because it is a originally Korean source, right? And some of the fights that I watched definitely employed like very, very clear technique. Of course, you have to embellish it a little bit with some mysticism and fantastic elements, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to knock them on that.
And when you get to the season finale, you then realize kind of the concept of actually God of High School, and it just, whether or not you like that direction or not,
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of the criticism came from.
But
But Fire Force, though,
so I did not like Fire Force at first. I thought it was pretty mid, to be honest.
and was it more sort of like the animation, the story, the characters,
the production. David Productions did a fantastic production quality. The music, the animation, everything is top notch. But what I didn't really get behind was, okay, Fire Force is about the fire. So what can you do with fire that can span so many volumes on Jump Plus, Manga Plus by Viz Media?
like over 30 volumes.
And also, what kind of variations can you possibly do? I mean, The Last Airbender had to not just do fire, right? So, what can Fire Force do where it's pretty much it's fire or nothing?
It does seem kind of limited in terms of what they can really do with this particular plot, but
And
they've managed to make 4 curves of it.
And let me tell you, I am very, very much ready to admit that I was wrong. I think the fact that they boxed themselves in, relying only on the element of fire, kind of, how when you have a blank canvas.
You make do with what you got, right?
Yeah, so then you think of really creative ways to navigate or fight. Or, okay, so the main character can, like, zoom around like Iron Man. So what else is there? And to be honest, in the very beginning, there isn't much there. But then when you get into, like, the whole entourage ensemble cast, you then see all these, like, evolutions of these powers or how they try to maneuver their way. It becomes actually quite cool. And I really have to admit that even though I didn't like certain directions, let's say there were certain religious connotations,
Okay.
I still think that the action scenes are rock solid. Like, super rock solid. And the second time around, when I gave it a second chance, it was one of the best decisions.
I think, like, the juxtaposition between using, like, very dark palettes. I mean, all their uniforms are just pure black, but then
Their
like,
fire looks fucking gorgeous.
Yeah.
Like, the fire looks beautiful.
you know how, like, whenever we talk about, like, water animation in, like, anime and video games,
Or
it's
like in Demon Slayer. But yeah, I think Fire Force obviously should have very good portrayal and depiction of fire.
makes sense. It's in the title,
And
yeah.
100% it does. Honestly, it was one of the few animes where I had to change my score after completing it and rewatching it.
I mean, where do you sit on it now then, in terms of, like?
It's an 8 the first season. I gave it a 7 in the beginning. I didn't really vibe well with it. And it was just a very good... I mean, don't knock it until you try it, basically. I got burned a bit, and then it's all good.
It's all good. The Fire Force is just coming through right now.
Exactly.
All right, cool. Okay, so those are the first two sections we wanted to cover. Now, when Jason was talking about sort of like flipping it 180 and going from realism to mysticism and fantastic qualities kinds of like animation, we're going to do another 180, but in the wrong direction.
We can't do the 180. We don't even know where the fuck to go with it.
Yeah, because we're basically 180 and we tumbled into the realm of what the fuck is going on.
Where the fuck are we, guys?
We have 4 series that we will highlight in this particular one.
So Will, we don't know where the fuck we are, right? So,
Yeah.
But the first thing we need to do is food.
Yeah. Oh, so convenient. We're in a supermarket right now. Look at this. Oh, there's bento boxes.
Oh wait, isn't it like in the late afternoon, evening?
Oh, it's perfect. That means all these bento boxes are going to be like half price.
Well, wait, they're all gone now. Wait, we were just there.
Oh wait, no. I say there's one left over there. Wait, hold on.
We are talking about
there's 2 of us.
David Productions anime adaptation of Bento.
So
BEN-TO.
as you can imagine from what we just said, yeah, the plot is just fucking dumb. But it is also absolutely entertaining to watch. It's literally just a free-for-all combat scene of people just trying to fight over half-price bentos at supermarkets. Now, you're probably wondering, well, I mean, this is just a supermarket arc from a slice of life added with some action, right? You're not wrong. But
I mean, yeah, but if you injected Half-Life into it, kind of, if you have like this, instead of Bushido way, there's like the Bento way of like order of things,
and instead of instead of using kunai, like the throwing daggers, you're using chopsticks.
Is like fucking dumb. I love it, but I don't love it in the sense that
it's not a great show.
It's not a great show,
right? I mean, like the score tells, I think it's like a 6.7 on my anime list, somewhere thereabouts.
But it is kind of cool to have on the screen while you're doing some other stuff.
It's definitely entertaining. Like if I was in like a manga cafe and sometimes they might have like TVs that are on mute and they'll have like some anime playing in the background and there's like bento playing there, I'll be like, this looks kind of sick. When you turn on the audio, you're kind of like, no, this is actually not that cool. But it's a fun watch. I think like there is like, of course, some proper technique thrown into it as well. Like dude, if you can throw a pair of chopsticks straight like a throwing dagger, that's that's technique, right? Being able to use that and also use the sole of your school shoes to be able to block a pair of chopsticks from hitting you.
So you finished it recently, right?
No, I watched like some episodes. I didn't finish it, but I watched enough to be like, this is definitely worth recommending to someone who just wants to turn off their brain and just be dumb.
Didn't at some point they put down like the grocery baskets and then they make a circle and then they have a brawl or something like that?
Yeah.
That's just the level of absurdity that Bento has.
Close quarter combat. You gotta de-escalate the situation and take out your adversary.
By the way, those supermarket grocery like aisles are fucking like forever in some cases.
It's also like, oh man, like let's like turn the gas off and go a little bit slice of life. It's always so nice that when you walk into a Japanese grocery store and the first thing you see are the mountains of discount bentos and onigiris just waiting for you to pick up, because when you walk in with maybe a 500 yen coin, you can buy 2 of those boxes. That's lunch and dinner. Fucking amazing. All right, turn the gas back on again. The next most ridiculous what the fuck shit is this that I'm watching would be Keijo. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Oh my god. We watched this maybe 3 years ago, and to this day I still can't wrap my head around what the fuck is actually going on, because it
makes me feel dirty.
Yeah, this is like almost like the epitome of a guilty pleasure.
It is.
Because it feels so wrong watching this.
Like, imagine telling someone, so it's a sports anime. Yeah, it's actually, they play it straight. They are super serious about the sport.
They have Keijo academies, like literally training up and coming athletes.
So that's awesome. So it's like Haikyuu. Well, not exactly. Oh, so it's like Kuroko no Basket, right? No, well, not really.
They do have some magic mystical elements in there too.
So is it like sports? So what kind of sports is it? Is it like a sport that I know and I'm like,
it's a wrestling sport using boobs and butts.
There you go.
No arms, no legs, just straight boobs and butts.
In swimming pools.
Immediately, why are you walking away? No, come back. I need to tell you more about
Don't
what
drift
happens.
away, you know what I'm saying?
Well, you got to come back. I need to tell you more about how they use their butts to maneuver and take down their opponents.
And here's the thing. Their training arc, they play it so seriously that you just can't deny the sheer, like, oh, they're not taking the piss. They are not like, you could make 1,000 like ecchi jokes and make it all ecchi and perverted. And in many ways it is very perverted-esque, but they don't.
Yeah. Because it's just straight up trying to take itself as seriously as possible as a sports anime / manga. It's legitimately like the person who made this must have just walked over to whichever studio, whichever publication they were trying to get this to work. It's like he just meets a junior editor. It's like, dude, this shit's fucking dumb. Yeah, sure, go ahead, just show it to the editor in chief. I'm sure he'll love it. Oh, he will love it. Okay, cool. I meant that sarcastically. And then you showed over. It's like, huh. Sure, go ahead. I'll be interested to see which studio is going to pick it up. Wait, what? You found a studio that's actually going to pick up? Oh, okay, fine. Go ahead. See if it's popular. What? It's actually popular? Oh, fuck. Why?
So
how?
Unfortunately, IRL, it did kind of have the manga at least did have an unceremonious end because there was a lot of drama, I guess.
A lot of backlash, yeah.
Yeah, so and the editor, I guess, or the publishing company and the mangaka had a lot of problems.
And they just got fed up, yeah.
So, and then I think it went online for a bit, and I don't know. It was one of those unfortunate demise and long and drawn out. But
to be fair, it wasn't like you didn't see it coming. But let's just take a second to just be like, yo, Keijo, like, y'all fucking crazy.
Yes.
But this is also really fun
This
to
is
watch.
also fucking awesome. So,
I think we have to talk about the next two, like, in conjunction, right?
So Drifters and I made the mistake earlier. Instead of Records of Ragnarok, which is what I said, it should be Record of Ragnarok. These two shows we have mentioned numerous times, and we just felt like we should mention it again because, look.
I think because, like, we both read Record of Ragnarok first, and then we both watched some of it, and then we were both very disgusted by what we saw from season 1, which was done by Graphinica. And then
I did not read any of Drifters. I don't even know if it's even available, but the anime is like, oh, it should have been what Record of Ragnarok.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, small little disclaimer, there is a season 2 of Record of Ragnarok, and this time round they also have the Umeta company that's doing the animation in conjunction with Graphinica, and the score is substantially higher. I think it's like a whole point higher than season 1. Season 1 is like a 6.6, 6.7, and season 2 is like a 7.6, something like that. But yeah, I'm running off of what Jason said too. What Drifters is what basically Record of Ragnarok should have been from an animation perspective.
Or could have been, really.
Yeah. The manga, both of them are, well, I mean, I haven't read the Drifters manga, but the manga for Record of Ragnarok is amazing because they don't fluff around with the backstories. They don't really fluff around with plot either. They just focus solely on the fights.
So season 1 of Record of Ragnarok, 6.73.
Okay.
Season 2 is 7.54.
Yeah.
Both on Netflix.
So there you go.
I think Netflix exclusive, actually.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Close to a whole point. And that was the thing. Like, people just thought, dude, like, Netflix pumped a bunch of money into this and then flunked it. Or Graphinica just decided to shit the bed. And I think this time around they realized, yeah, you know what? Like, it was also just down to the fact that it got rushed. It just felt so rushed.
Do I have to watch season 2?
Well, maybe.
I kind of want to know, Will.
Same.
I kind of.
I
Okay,
do want to
fuck
know.
it. Let's go. Also, because it's the fight in season 2, we both know is probably one of like the highlights. So far.
Yeah. But Drifters, though.
Drifters
is some real Guilty Gear shit.
And here's the sad part: is I don't think we'll ever get anything more than what is currently available. Like, there's not going to be, like, a new thing that shows up. I think the manga has been in production for, like, or been in publication, and I think it might have been on hiatus so many times. Kind of like, what's that pirate mercenary, Black Lagoon?
Yeah.
It's just, like, it's not necessarily canceled, but it's not necessarily released, or I don't know.
They'll drop something after, like, 4 or 5 years, then kind of disappear again, like pirates, you know? But, like unlike Black Lagoon, where Black Lagoon is kind of like unique in that space, with Drifters we currently have Record of Ragnarok, and so it's kind of hard to bring Drifters back into the limelight with Record of Ragnarok sitting right there too. So I guess we'll just have to settle with Record of Ragnarok. Both of them are crazy as shit though.
I mean, if season 2, at least the MAL score is any indication, it sounds like it is a vast improvement. So hey, we'll report in probably at some point and let you know our thoughts.
Yep. Now, the last section, which I didn't really have a title for because it was just kind of too wordy, but I think this is these
the good shit.
Yeah, the 3 main sort of series that actually kind of brought about this discussion in the first place are historically significant because they've been running around for quite a long time. One of them being more recent, but the other 2 like just classics from the 80s and like still to this day have like major fandoms. One of which is actually still producing more shit with like their most recent season like airing this year. So the ones we're talking about now are one of my personal favorites, Kengan Ashura, one of other people's personal favorites, Baki, or Grappler Baki as it was originally known, and probably the one which is the most classic of the 3, Hajime no Ippo.
And maybe another 4th Megalobox.
Yeah.
You know, but like a very far
If it's
fourth.
within the Hajime no Ippo sort of universe.
Basically, do you like Rocky?
Yeah. Do you just like boxing in general? Because this is Rocky Balboa, the anime.
But instead of Rocky, it's like a kid.
Yeah. What's great about like these 3 specific series is that all 3 of them were sort of created by mangakas in terms of like story and art who also have prior experience within those specific mediums. Like, for example, Hajime no Ippo, the creator, used to actually be a boxing trainer. He's actually cornered a lot of fighters in boxing matches in Japan. The creator of Baki does a lot of wrestling on his own time and also was a member of the Japanese Defense Force, and Kengan Ashura, the storyboard, the story writer and the artist, along with their editor. All three of them are martial arts practitioners with like 50 years of experience between all three of them, and occasionally to be able to prepare for a scene, they would actually spar each other and sort of choreograph how they would like to create specific fighting arcs within Kengan Ashura.
So earlier on the first half, I kind of said that one of the possible restrictions due to being able to have very intricate and well done choreography in regards to these hand-to-hand or close-quarter combat sequences is A, due to budget, and B, due to expertise. So when you, as the creator or producer or editor, have that interest, that passion, that know-how, and also you double up in terms of roles because you're kind of like a consultant / advisor, and also you work in the production side.
Yeah, let's say like money is not a question. You have all the money you want to be able to make this shit. What can you do? Well, if you don't know what the fuck you're doing, then all that money is going to be wasted. But if you have that experience...
I mean, you could get a UFC fighter, like probably one of the best UFC fighters, as like a consultant, but if they don't know jack shit about the anime adaptation process, maybe there might be some miscommunication or disconnect between the creatives and the person that would have the most amount of technical knowledge.
Classic example would be like the whole X-Arm thing, bringing in the live action director to do a 3D anime. It's like that. Okay.
Oh, no, but it's 3D, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're three-dimensional things, and the anime can be in 3D, right? Yeah. There you go.
No.
A equals B.
And when we're talking about these three series, we're very like understanding that like some of them like you're gonna absolutely love, some of them you will not give a shit about, and some of them you might be kind of like blasé in the middle with it. But we sort of just wanted to highlight the sort of extremes that creators go to be able to create these properties, because it's not every day you come across someone who has 18 years of jiu-jitsu experience, or someone who was actually an active member of the Japanese Defense Force and was a part of the wrestling team, or someone who actually was a boxing trainer and boxed people and also cornered boxers in boxing matches. Like, it just makes sense that they're going to be making series based on what they are experienced in.
So I know that Hajime no Ippo is a classic. I also know that some people, including myself in certain cases, are very adverse to consuming really old shows. I think that at least, whether that sentiment is justified or not, at least I can understand it, right? I would say even though Megalobox is not necessarily that grounded in reality, because A, it's science fiction, and B, it's just not that technical. If you want to watch a boxing anime of sorts, I think Megalobox is a good in-between spot. And if you dig Megalobox, which by all means you probably will, then you have Hajime no Ippo always there to really go the long haul all the way of like the real Rocky Balboa anime teenage boy experience.
Yeah, or if you're caught up but not fully caught up, don't forget there's also Megalobox Nomad, right? So
exactly.
There's plenty of stuff to watch. Now, as Jason was mentioning, Megalobox is the new sort of contemporary spiritual successor to Hajime no Ippo. And
new kid on the block. I mean, even that coach, the boxing coach, is very much of, I think the boxer's called Joe, right? It's just called Joe. Come on.
Oh, wait, are we thinking about the wrong one? Ashito no Joe. Ashito no Joe is actually the one.
Oh, shit. What is Hajime no Ippo?
That's Fighting Spirit.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Holy shit, that's a big blunder.
Oh, well. We make mistakes. We should have probably talked about Ashito no Joe, too. But we're going to talk about Hajime no Ippo instead. Whilst Jason is scrambling to fix our mistakes, I'll be talking about Hajime no Ippo. So Hajime no Ippo, which I did watch, by the way, was founded back in 1989, serialized in Kodansha. That was the one. And it's got like a lot of adaptations in terms of main series, but also OVAs and movies. The first one was done by Madhouse, as was like their subsequent sequels like New Challenger. Rising was the most recent one. That one came out in fall 2013, but that was a co-production between MAPPA and Madhouse.
So when I was thinking of the anime, it was Hajime no Ippo, But Megalobox, the character Joe, is a reference to Ashita no Joe.
Yeah.
So what I had in my mind legitimately is Hajime no Ippo, but
Not wrong, not right.
not wrong, not right. So just
Forgive
cut me
us.
some slack, please, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Unfortunately, neither of us have watched Ashita no Joe, but I have watched some Hajime no Ippo. We both watched and quite like Megalobox. So when we're talking about things being grounded in realism, a lot of the fighting technique, like the jabbing, the straight throws, the torquing of the hips, the Dewey roll that he uses, which is like insane. Like it can get a little comical at times.
I don't even know what the Dewey roll
The
is.
Dewey roll is when you basically have your arms up, like gloves touching your face, elbows in so you don't get liver shots, and just ducking and rolling.
Oh, like bob and weave type maneuver?
So, like, for example, like as a real life sort of example, like the Floyd Mayweathers, the Mike Tysons.
I've heard those names before.
So Floyd Mayweather was known to be one of the best defensive boxers. I'm not going to say who is the best one because they're all very, very good. Personally, I like Canelo more, but Floyd Mayweather, he's 51-0, I think, or 50-0. But
All I know is that they're boxers.
Very good boxer. And the thing that he does the best is that he's able to duck and weave his way out of trouble. Mike Tyson, on the other hand, was a straight up like dirtbag brawler.
What about Ali?
Ali was just all about philosophy. Just knowing how to be light on his feet, knowing that it's not so much how quickly I can punch you, it's the fact that I can punch you.
I mean, you can float and sting pretty well, right?
That guy was great. So they take a lot of examples, a lot of experiences from like real life boxers and employ it into their series, which is great. You want that in a boxing fight. You want that in an anime that focuses on realistic boxing. And yes, there are some sequences within Hajime Ippo where the main character kind of ducks and weaves a bit too much. Dude, like he was doing the Dewey roll for like 30 seconds in one go. Because the whole point of the Dewey roll is to be able to sort of like sway momentum. Be able to create enough swing between like left to right, and then when you're ready,
and then shifting your like center of gravity, right?
Yeah,
your weight,
and in ways either to sort of close down your opponent, to put down, there you go, right?
There you go.
You do know the techniques behind boxing.
Well, well, no, not really, but from like a academic standpoint, yeah, because I better be because I study sports science. Yeah.
So some of that stuff when I was watching, I was just like, this is fucking awesome. It's ridiculous that they're doing so many Dewey rolls in one go, but like, that was a fun time to watch. They have some of it in Megalobox, but not all that much.
Yeah.
Really.
How about you can say your piece about Baki, but I think we should just skip it if possible and focus on the crown jewel.
Yeah, Baki itself, it's like it's definitely like so there's two different Bakis, but they're all within the same universe. There's a Grappler Baki, which started in 1991. The original anime adaptation was done by group TAC in 2001. There was a sequel for that one, and then more recently on Netflix, when you have the original net animation adaptations, which is Baki. So not Grappler Baki, just straight Baki. I even think like the manga as well. There is Grappler Baki and Baki.
So it's like Naruto and Naruto Shippuden kind of thing.
Exactly like that.
I see.
Yeah. That's why it was kind of confusing when you're trying to put together like the notes for it too. It's like, which one are we talking about? We're talking about the original one that came out. Or no, there's not so much original sequel. It's more just the naming, because there's Grappler Baki, there's Baki, and there's Hanma Baki. What?
No, but Will, listen, in Monogatari there are 3 seasons, right? But then the final season is not the final season because there are like different arcs and then
Yeah. Confusing as shit. But yeah, like I don't really like it all that much because some of the fights aren't really fights at all. It's just a bit kind of weird. Very gruesome. I have to give them that. And that's probably why some people really like Baki in general. But, the guy, has his own wrestling experiences. Definitely employs some of them in there. Some of them he definitely takes liberties in terms of, embellishing how deadly a grapple is or how deadly, blowing someone's eardrum out is.
But Netflix does not only have one, mixed martial arts, hand-to-hand combat CQC anime as 2. The other one being Kengan Ashura, with the second season coming out, I think, this year?
September.
Yeah.
So season 1 had part 1, part 2 that came out, I think, like 2018, very, very long ago. Both of which I've watched. I've read a lot of the manga as well. The manga now is completed, but there is a sequel manga called Kengan Omega.
New Omega, something?
Kengan Omega,
Omega,
yeah. Which has also got like several hundred chapters in itself. That's probably going to be adapted next if there is continuing like interest in adapting the Kengan Ashura universe.
And to be fair, you weren't expecting a second season, right?
No, because it was just dead in the water for so long.
Right.
I mean, like I finished it all like 4 or 5 years ago, and then I was just sitting here like
Netflix. If you could continue Dorohedoro, that would be nice.
probably won't happen. But
Probably won't happen, but still, like that would be nice. Okay,
that was crazy.
so Kengan Ashura, from my perspective, is a very simple show in terms of its premise, in terms of the difference between, I guess, a fantastical thing. It's none of that. I mean, there is like some elements of that, but it's very much a simple, you want to see people fight, but you want to make it anime, kind of.
It's basically Drifters and Record of Ragnarok, but without like the crazy superpowers.
And it's in 3D.
Yeah.
And actually, I did not hate the 3D. In fact, I got pretty used to it. And one thing I did not like was when they got into part 2 and it shifted some of it in 2D. Pissed me the fuck off. Like, you were doing 3D fine. The fuck are you doing?
I can't believe I'm hearing you actually telling someone off for doing 2D over 3D.
No, but the first couple episodes of part 2,
I know.
it looks super weird. Like
I spent a whole part 1 getting used to this shit, and then now you're going back to 2D. Like what game are you playing here?
And then like towards like the midpoint of part 2, they go back to fully 3D. I mean, obviously the flashbacks are done in a more picturesque way, but it is not actually like traditional 2D animation, right? So it's like moving pictures.
Yeah. So you started off, before even watching any of this, just hearing it from me and me showing you some clips of it, and immediately you're like, the 3D is kind of jarring. But now that you've actually watched both parts 1 and part 2, has your head swung around? Have you turned over and now become more nice towards Kengan Ashura?
Yes. I still gave both parts an 8, but I think part 2
is slightly weaker than part 1.
It's slightly
right?
weaker, except for the last couple of episodes, which really pulled it out from a 7, in my opinion. It was where the first part I was like, oh, it's an 8, but it could be a 7 on some days, but it's still an 8. Whereas here, for part 2, I was the inverse. I was ready to give it a 7 and convinced it until like the last like 4 episodes. Beyond that, I would say that it's just a bunch of people fighting. I mean, there is like a premise, there's technically storylines, and of course there is a multitude of characters, but it really doesn't matter in terms of me telling you or even in some way spoiling you, because it really is just watching the whole tournament arc unfold.
Yeah. And what I liked about it as well is that it's kind of like watching the beginnings of the UFC or the Ultimate Fighting Championship. So it is.
I thought it was WWE.
No,
especially like in part 2, the entrances,
entrances.
Yeah,
it's definitely because I think it takes a lot of inspiration from Pride FC, which is like the Japanese fighting competitions that they had, and those are like legitimately like those crazy fireworks and masks, like those entries into the ring and all that.
And that's why I like part 1 a bit more, because the setting is varied. A lot of the characters you're kind of meeting for the first time, and they put the main characters in kind of odd situations. Like one is on a freighter, I think, right?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of scenario is pretty cool. There's obviously like all these, whereas in part 2, it's just straight up like, here's an arena, here's one fighter, here's another fighter, fight. Oh, okay, here's the winner, here's the loser, end of story. I mean, end of the part 2.
Yeah. So in terms of like the founding of the UFC, of course, this is not anything anime related, but it will kind of pertain to why I like Kengan Ashura a lot. When you watch UFC nowadays, it's usually like fit within like weight classes. If you are a lightweight, you fight against other lightweights. If you are a featherweight, bantamweight, heavyweight, whatever, then you will be fighting a corresponding like similar heavyweight, a similar weighted fighter.
And in reality, I think that is the right way to go about it.
And then in terms of like disciplines, like the art styles you compete in, that's why it's called mixed martial arts. You don't just fight using karate, capoeira, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, grappling, wrestling. You definitely have a mixed repertoire of different techniques and skills that you use. Whereas when it comes to like the origins of the UFC, it was just straight up who was the best fighter. And so at that point, there were no weight classes. There was no restriction on what fighting styles you had. You could just be a street fighter. You could be a boxer. You could only just do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But you could be 140 pounds, 5'6", fighting against someone who is 270 pounds, 6'4", and you just see who's a better fighter. That was it. That was how it started. And that's what this series is. They're all different weight classes. They all have one specific style. It's like Street Fighter at this point.
Yeah, it is. And when in reality your weight and your height and your build really dictates how good of a chance you are to win in a fight.
Yeah,
versus
it helps to swing your advantage, right?
Extremely, especially when it comes to some of the disproportionate like weight or height between certain fights in Kengan Ashura, right?
Yeah.
So I think now though we have come to the point where Will and I, because I've consumed at least all of season 1, part 1 and 2. I have a top 3 characters from bronze, silver, gold.
I have a de facto number 1 because I like all the other characters too, but one just holds a place in my heart no matter what.
So, Will, I think what I'm going to do is you can save your number 1 or your sole pick and try to guess the number 2 and number 3 spot. And I will accept you don't have to say it in order. Obviously, the number 1 spot's different, right? But number 3 and number 2, you can kind of say either or. Like, what do you think based off of what you know of me? What would you pick?
Is Jun Sekibayashi one of them?
Nope.
The pro wrestler? No, you didn't have the pro wrestler in top 3.
Oh, the Zangief guy?
Yeah, the pro wrestler. Oh, he was entertaining to watch.
I like him, but
he was legit like batshit insane.
Did not make top 3.
It can't be Lehito. I think he's the first guy that he fought. I think he was like.
He's the tan kick dude.
Yeah.
No.
No. He was the brawler. I'm not talking about the guy that does the Cambodian fighting style. I actually do not know.
So at number 3, known as the Dissector, is Hajime
the fucking
Hanafusa.
Doctor with his fucking implants.
Yeah. That is. Let's not mention that especially because season 2 is coming up soon. So,
fair.
But yes, that is my number 3 pick. My number 2 pick,
Ryo Inaba.
Nope.
The weird long-haired, twisty, capoeira style guy.
Nope.
Go ahead.
It is Suekichi Kaneda, also known as the Giant Killer.
Okay. All right.
And originally, he was my number 1, but the last couple episodes convinced me that Cosmo Imai, the King of Stranglers, is my favorite character in
Cosmo number fucking 1.
Dude,
oh my god.
It is hard to really spoil, and you really should savor those last couple episodes because it really solidifies that character in terms of I don't give a fuck about Oma, which is the main character. I don't give a shit.
More often than not, main characters are fucking worthless.
I care a lot about Kazuo, who is kind of like the coach manager.
Kazuo Noguchi?
No, the coach manager.
Oh.
I thought his struggle, his journey actually was quite interesting, right? But honestly, I mean, Cosmo, I was ready.
Kazuo Yamashita, that's his name, yeah.
Yeah. So I was ready to really not care too much about Cosmo, especially because I don't know that much about like holds and grappling.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is very technique-driven, for sure.
It reminds me of King of Fighters. Actually, a lot of these characters remind me of King of Fighters. I think Mary is Cosmo, basically.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I love Cosmo Imai. Oh, he is legitimately my favorite character across all of the series of Kengan Ashura. Just the fact that like he is not only the smallest but also like, the youngest fighter there. Literally, like the lack of experience compared to all the other fighters they have, but he is so confident in his ability. He's not cocky. He just knows that he is a fucking good grappler, and what he does to be able to take out his opponents, even when like literally the odds are stacked against him, and the fact that he's fighting someone that is not only taller but bigger, more experienced, and employing excessive force to submit him, and he won't break.
I mean, comes to no surprise that a fictional anime series or manga series has the ability to basically fabricate a quote-unquote reality in that world where these types of disadvantageous height weight differences won't really dictate too much.
Now, to be fair, when I was talking about the early days of the UFC, there actually was an instance. I forgot his first name, but his name he was a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter named Gracie, and he fought up against somebody who was literally twice his size. Didn't throw a single punch, just leg locked him, arm barred him, put like legitimately his arms, hips, legs, and chest all wrapped around him. Submitted the guy who was twice his weight, twice his height, and won. Very grounded reality, but again, you don't ever really
That's like
see
a unicorn in the pantheon,
you just
right?
don't see those David Goliath kind of things,
Yeah. I mean, that's just facts, right? It's not saying that it is impossible.
I'm so happy that Cosmo's your number one.
It was so ready to not be my number one, though.
Just because the fact that there wasn't all that much to
and
cheer for him.
his arc was really good towards the end. Like, no joke. Like, it was actually phenomenal.
Yeah. Cosmo's great. So you've watched all of part 1, part 2. So season 1 completed.
I'm not sure if I'll watch season 2.
And what's the hold up there?
There's tons of other shit that I probably want to watch
ahead
of it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I won't watch it.
There probably is a lot of other stuff you need to watch that are on, yeah.
But I won't discount it like I previously did. I have to be very honest. I admit that I was like, okay, fine, I'll watch Kengan Ashura because I kind of...
Isn't Solo Leveling coming out later this year?
I don't know if they announced...
But it should be coming out in 2023.
I'm not sure.
If it is, that's probably like higher in the pecking order compared to Kengan Ashura.
There's so many things, right?
Yeah.
I'm not... Rising
of the Shield Hero
I really
3.
threw away Kengan Ashura and...
Like you kind of... It wasn't like... You kind of dismissed it from the early age.
Because when you said like MMA, grappling, I'm just like, that doesn't sound like my cup of tea. And when you said 3D, I'm like, that's definitely not my cup of tea. And granted, okay, I'm eating my words slightly, but it is a good show. Definitely a good show.
And to those who have watched it before and have been dying for a season 2, like we all should be pretty excited to, wait for another 4 months before we get to watch season 2 of Kengan Ashura.
Do you think they'll have part 1 and part 2?
It'll probably be split.
So they would still do 2 curs.
I think 2 just because like I'm thinking about like what they need to adapt to be able to finish the story.
So you think 4 curs would finish it?
Probably.
Okay.
Because there are some parts that can be sped up. I think like if they are going to finish it, then there are certain parts that can cut out. If they did cut it out, I'd be a little upset, but I can understand that would be a decision they need to make. If they don't finish it within the next 2 curs, I guess we'll have to expect Kengan Ashura in a final season. Something
just like Ultraman final season. Yep.
Pretty much. I need to watch that.
And with that, we are finally at the end of this episode.
Wow, can you believe this is the shortest episode we've done in like 6 months?
Well, yeah, that's because we didn't have reading, watching, or news.
But we still did quite a lot, too.
Yeah. But you can always reach us through our email, gapalette@gmail.com. That's GAPAL.
GAP Palette, right? Or GA Palette.
GA Palette.
Uh,
GAPALETTE.
boom.
At gmail.com, all lowercase, all one word, using the handle at PaletteGood, capital P and capital G, all one word. Our GAP Discord server link is also in our show description. We have a website, www.goodanimepalette.com, all lowercase, all one word. You should check it out. Music credits for this episode. Our intro music is In Year by Hasten. Our break music is Botai by Oi. And our outro music is I Don't Mind, the instrumental version by Particle House. You can always support the music artists that we feature by listening to them on Spotify, Apple Music, or other various music listening platforms. And our royalty-free music was provided by Epidemic Sound. And if you're interested, you can always sign up using our referral link that is in the show description. But terms and conditions apply.
I didn't think we'd be able to talk this much about CQC and hand-to-hand fighting in anime and manga, but clearly, like, even though you're not necessarily someone that gravitates towards that kind of thing, that you've already actually experienced a lot of it, and now that we actually have a platform to talk about it, it's not hard for you to now sort of break away from the I'm only consuming it from a spectacle perspective, and actually now being like, I can sort of see the technique employed in some of these fighting sequences now. I mean, it might not still be something that you naturally think about when you're watching anime and manga, especially when you're watching shonen action, but do you feel that perhaps now there might be like an additional dimension to how you appreciate combat sequences? Or do you think that it's still going to be more rooted in the hey, if it looks good, it looks good?
I think the latter more than the former, unfortunately. I don't think it is necessarily a knock or a lack of motivation to understand or comprehend. It's just more of
you're not quite there yet.
I'm not quite there yet. I don't know if I will ever go there, just because it's just not my thing. I'm not like,
you don't watch UFC, you don't watch like MMA or like other sort of like fighting competitions.
I have nothing against sport, MMA sports or any of that sort. Like if that's what you're into, awesome. Honestly, I will eat my words on Kengan Ashura, but I am not necessarily like super hot and anticipating season 2.
It's better than what you expected,
but
right?
It is definitely better than what I expected for sure.
Yeah,
and it's definitely worth your time to watch it.
Yep. And to anyone that's listening that is sort of like a mix of a anime fan as well as a combat sports fan, any of the stuff we talked about today is definitely worth your watch. I know that I'm talking to a very, very small minority, but
we knew that from the get-go, right?
And even if you're not in that minority, even if you're just someone who just does not give a fuck about this shit, I still think it's worth checking out just to see if you can broaden your exposure to other types of combat and other types of fighting in anime and manga. So yeah, I guess that's generally it.
Yeah, I guess that's it for today then.
Yeah. We're going to close this off because Jason and I have a sparring session now. We're going to duke it out and see which one's better, whether it is the JoJo series or the Monogatari series. We never actually declared a winner, so we're going to do it with an arm wrestling match.
No, we should use swords.
And bento boxes.
And then go online.
No, we should get samurai swords, like get katanas, and see how many bento boxes we can cut in one swing.
No, we need to figure out something like ingenious or witty as you press the stop button.
Yeah, we'll figure that out. Bye.